بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين صلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين متابعين بإحسان يوم الدين أما بعد. So first I apologize for the delay. There was a car accident on 287. Now the interesting thing is the accident was not in the direction I was going to, it was in the opposite direction. But everybody, as they're going, they're just watching, and so it slowed everything down. So, Jazakumullah khair for coming to the Hajj workshop. And to be honest, it's one of those workshops that it becomes very difficult to pick and choose what should be covered and to what depth, because there's a lot of details. So I'm going to do my best to kind of have a bit of an overview of it, and then leave the questions for you to kind of clarify where you need more explanation. I have a whiteboard because I wanted to draw some of the few things as you go through the process. But the way I'm going to do this, inshallah, is I'm going to start with a section about preparing for Hajj and Umrah, right? So that will include things such as, the verse from the Quran that orders preparation, the type of preparation you would need, whether they're spiritual, mental, fiqh preparation, physical, which really has an aspect of health. This portion will be done, inshallah, by Dr. Azhar. I'm going to ask him to come and help out with this portion. And then just about fiqh aspects of financial preparation, logistics, and the types of Hajj. And from there, we're going to move to the Umrah, step by step. In that section, we're going to talk about the prerequisites, the pillars, the mandatory actions, and then go through the entire step of Umrah, followed by the, we're going to mention prior to that the state of Ihram. And then we're going to talk about the Hajj, going step by step, but hopefully this will be easier because we pretty much covered the bulk of it in the Umrah, going to the state of Ihram, the nullifiers of Ihram, the steps of Tawaf, prerequisites of Sa'i, all that's been covered. And so the remaining stuff is just for the day by day of things that are going to happen once you start Hajj. In the process, when we're talking about Ihram, I'm going to touch only on the things that commonly happen in terms of error that will require expiation. I'm not going to talk about the things that most of the time don't happen unless it's going to be asked about, right? I don't know how long this is going to take, I'll be honest with you, but I'm also working on a document to outline everything we talked about, hopefully. I'm working on it slowly. So far, it's going longer than I expected. It's about 16 pages so far, so it's more like a manual. But hopefully, it has pictures, alhamdulillah. So hopefully, by the time I'm done, I can perhaps send it as a PDF for people who are going to Hajj or Umrah, and they can have it as something to consult with. Now, by all means, this is not a fatwa book, right? I'm going to say this again. It's not a fatwa book. This just gives you kind of the key and essentials of performing your Hajj and Umrah. Okay, so that being said, we are going to start with, inshallah, with the part one, which is the preparation. And if you need breaks in between, please let me know. I don't think we'll go all the way to Isha. I think it's exhausting to go all the way to Isha. If need be, we might have a second session. Is that okay, Sheikh? Right, part two, maybe perhaps, if we need to. So in part one, essentially, this is more of the preparation for both Hajj and Umrah. And this comes from the verse of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala where He said, وَتَزَوَّدُوا فَإِنَّ خَيْرَ الزَّادِ التَّقْوَى وَتَزَوَّدُوا فَإِنَّ خَيْرَ الزَّادِ التَّقْوَى. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala orders the believers, He says, take provisions. تَزَوَّدُوا, they take provisions. And the best of provisions is taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَاتَّقُونِ يَا أُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ, and fear me or have taqwa of me, O people of understanding. So this is really an order from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that a person who's going to head for Hajj, and by extension, Umrah, because Umrah is a minor form of Hajj, right? It's called Hajj al-Asghar, right? The minor Hajj. There's an order to prepare for it. And that word is very general. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala specifies the best of preparation is taqwa, which means there's also other forms of preparation. And those provisions include preparations such as, which we're going to cover essentially, spiritual, mental, fiqh, physical, all these things. And those are really important. And usually somebody asks, okay, I understand, I understand the spiritual aspect. I understand the fiqh aspect, but why with the mental aspect? It is actually important, and spiritual really is connected, and it helps with the mental aspect. And we're going to go through this, inshallah. So when we refer to the spiritual aspect, spiritual preparation, I'm going to mention just a couple of points about 4 things that would help with the preparation. But honestly, I'm just kind of being brief. There's a lot that can go into spiritual preparation, but I'm just going to mention top 4 things perhaps, in my opinion, that would benefit a person to prepare spiritually. And it's really important when we embark on any form of active worship that we are prepared spiritually and mentally, right? Including, by the way, salah. Like a lot of times people, they say, I can't focus on salah, I cannot, I don't benefit from salah. And part of the problem is we don't prepare ourselves for it spiritually and mentally, right? When we're getting there to stand in front of Allah Ta'ala, we're so accustomed to just getting into the prayer, it's a chore, we're getting it over with, that it takes away from the spirituality of the prayer, from the benefit that we can get from it, right? And so really this is true in every act of worship, right? Whether it's 5 daily prayers or zakah or hajj or you name it, right? That spiritual preparation and mental preparation is important. So when we talk about the spiritual preparation, one of the things we can look at that would help prepare us spiritually and kind of create a driving force of that yearning of wanting to go for Hajj and Umrah is to look at the virtues of Hajj and Umrah, right? The virtues of Hajj and Umrah. And there is a reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam quite often talk about the virtues of different acts of worship. And that is to encourage us to act upon them and perform them, right? And there are multiple and many different virtues mentioned in Hajj. I'm going to just stick to 2 hadiths narrated by the Prophet ﷺ. The first one was narrated by Abu Hurairah anhu, and it's muttafaq alayh, agreed upon between Sahih, Bukhari and Muslim. Both mentioned this hadith. And Abu Hurairah anhu said, that the Prophet ﷺ said, Al-Umrah ila al-Umrah kaffaratun lima baynahuma wal-Hajj al-Mabrur laysa lahu jaza' illa al-Jannah. So the Prophet ﷺ said, the performance of Umrah, right? Al-Umrah ila al-Umrah, right? So performing one Umrah and the next Umrah. So in between those Umrah is an expiation for sins committed between it, right? So you perform an Umrah and then followed by another one. Sins in between are expiated. And the reward of a accepted Hajj, Hajj Mabrur, right? A accepted Hajj is nothing but Jannah, right? So this hadith not only focuses and sheds light on the importance of Umrah and Hajj in the life of a Muslim, but it also motivates the Muslim to perform as much as possible whenever they can. So any opportunity they can get to go for Umrah, they would do it, right? In another interesting narration, the Prophet ﷺ said that it actually removes poverty, eliminates poverty, right? So between Hajj and Umrah, performing Hajj and Umrah to Umrah, it actually removes poverty. The hadith also that kind of mentioned also mentions that the accepted Umrah will eliminate a person's sins. Now, one common question that I quite often get, or that's usually asked, does that include major sins? Right. We understand minor sins, obviously, it wouldn't be included in there. And minor sins are mentioned specifically in a hadith, between the prayer to the prayer, the sins are forgiven as long as the person, right, avoids major sins. So does this hold true to the Umrah? Many of the scholars will tell you yes. The Umrah would eliminate your minor sins, all of them. Major sins require something additional, and that is repentance. Right? Major sins require something additional, which is repentance. Wallahu a'lam. Now, the other hadith that I'm going to mention is narrated by Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhu. He said, the Prophet ﷺ said, Al-Ghazi fi sabilillah, wal-Hajju wal-Mu'tamir, wal-Hajju wal-Mu'tamir, wafdullah, دعاهم فأجابوه وسألوه فأعطاهم. So this hadith, it says that the Prophet ﷺ said, the one who fights in the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the one who performs Hajj, or the pilgrim that perform Hajj and Umrah, are delegates, wafd. They're delegates to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He invited them, so they responded to him, and they asked him and He gave them, right? He asked him, and they asked him, and He gives them. And so this hadith does have another added beautiful dimension to it, and that is that it highlights that the person performing Hajj or Umrah is actually chosen by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when they go, they are delegates of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they're the guests of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is hosting them, and He had invited them to perform this ritual of Hajj or Umrah, right? And I want you to reflect on this for a second, right? What kind of honor would usually one of us feel if a person of a high status invites them, right? Now, this is the Creator of the heavens and the earth. He essentially invited you to visit His Kaaba, right? Masjid al-Haram, to come and worship Him. And if you look at it, if you're able to go, then yes, Allah invited you. Otherwise, He would not have written it for you. Allah Alam. Now, it can also be understood from this hadith that the dua of the Muslim who's performing Hajj and Umrah is accepted, right? The one performing Hajj and Umrah, his dua is accepted. طيب. The second thing that a person can do to help them prepare spiritually, which is a bit it's usually considered something basic, but it's always a good thing to remind ourselves, is sincerity, right? As the Prophet ﷺ said, and as narrated by Umar ibn Khattab, the Prophet ﷺ said, "Al-a'malu bin-niyya," right? Al-a'malu bin-niyya, that deeds are by intention. And it is the intention really that what makes a difference in any deed. Any deed that is performed, what makes a fundamental difference is a person's intention. Regardless of how much effort they put into it, if they have the wrong intention, that is not accepted. If they associate with it then other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then it's not accepted. In any way, usually, right? And so sincerity is something that is important. And we need to constantly remind ourselves of that intention in every step of our journey, from the time we leave and plan to the time we finish. Everything, we need to keep reminding ourselves about this. And one of the most interesting things about sincerity is it actually one of those things that in that journey of Hajj and Umrah, it actually allows us to overcome many of the difficulties we face, because we are always remembering and constantly reminding ourselves why we're doing this. We're doing it for our parents, right? And our children, and to be called Hajji, right? You guys wallahi are asleep, except maybe one person. Why are we going for Hajj and Umrah? To be called Hajji? What's your name, Shaykh? So we can be called Hajj Ibrahim. My son would love this if I call him Hajj Ibrahim. You guys go to Hajj to be called Hajj? Excuse me, you can't call me Ibrahim. You got to call me Hajj Ibrahim now on. I don't mean to pick on you, Shaykh. I'm sorry. Is that why we go for Hajj and Umrah? No, right. Hajj Umrah. They call a person, they go to Hajj, they call them Hajj or Hajji. طيب. اللي بيروح عمره بيقولوا له حجي. طيب بيروح عمره بيقولوا له ايه؟ لا يا عمري. Sorry, I don't mean anything. That's an Arabic joke. I think we need to clip this out of the YouTube video, by the way. All right, so why do we go for Hajj and Umrah? Why do we go for Hajj and Umrah? All right, and we do it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? It's not we're trying to escape our families or run away from our kids or spouses or responsibilities. That's not the purpose. The purpose is to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when we have that in mind, once again, any difficulty we face, it becomes easily overcome because we're doing it for Allah. Okay? All right, the third thing that we need to do to prepare ourselves spiritually is repentance, right? Sincere repentance. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَتُوبُوا إِلَى اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا أَيُّهَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تُفْلِحُونَ, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this verse is addressing Surah An-Nur, and in many other verses, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala orders the believers to perform tawbah. You know you're louder than me and the microphone. That's impressive, Shaykh. It's also depressing for me. I'm sorry, because I get a lot of complaints that I don't project, apparently. So I feel jealous of people that can project. طيب, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala orders the believers. He says, and return to Allah, right? وَتُوبُوا إِلَى اللَّهِ, which means repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and turn to Allah in repentance, all of you, O believers, that you might succeed. So that's an order. And really, honestly, tawbah has to be done anytime we perform a sin. But in this case, it is really important if we want to go for Hajj and Umrah, that we make sure that we start our journey and our planning by sincere repentance, because sins can be an impediment. It can be an obstacle for our acts of worship or for our dua to be accepted. Put it this way, right? Sins are one of the things that prevent the acceptance of dua, and at the same time it removes blessings. And this is the last thing we want on a journey of Hajj, right? We don't want to start our journey with things that weigh us down, right? We want to start on a clean slate, and that happens by repentance, because then anything that happens afterward is more of elevation in reward and spirituality. Now, we also don't want to, when we talk about repentance, we don't want to wait until we repent until we're on the mountain of Arafah, or until the completion of, our Hajj. Because one can say, you know what, I'm going to go perform Hajj, and Allah eliminates all sins after Hajj, so why should I repent now? Right? That person doesn't realize that in itself is a sin. Because essentially it's a refusal to admit our errors and sins, and refusal to repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That shouldn't happen this way, right? But it also indicates there's almost like an intention, like an unconscious intention. I don't need to repent now. Hajj will be accepted. Are you sure your Hajj will be accepted? That's the first question, right? We don't know. And so it's better for us to go there while asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness, so we can have an increased chance and possibility that our acts of worship be accepted, that our Hajj is accepted. One thing we also should be careful of is never ever, in this process of repentance, to intend to go back to our known sins after we come back. And I'm talking about intent. Like actually a person says, when I come back, I'm not going to change, right? I'm just going to go back to my normal happy routine. Alhamdulillah, I did Hajj, performed my obligation, right? But that's not a form of repentance. In fact, it's a form of insistence. And many of the scholars mentioned that insisting even on a minor sin can turn it into a major sin, right? Insistence on a minor sin can turn it into a major sin, let alone insisting on a major sin. Wallahu a'lam. The last thing I'm going to mention in terms of preparing spiritually is dua. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَقَالَ رَبُّكُمْ ادْعُونِي أَسْتَجِبْ لَكُمْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, our Lord, He said, وَقَالَ رَبُّكُمْ, and your Lord says, call, ud'uni, call upon me, and I will respond to you. And dua, we know this, and it's just a reminder that it is one of the most powerful weapons that we have as believers. So we should ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when we embark on this journey, and even prior to embarking on it, to make dua that He would facilitate this journey for us in every way possible, to enable us to perform the rituals in a way that would please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would accept our act of worship. Right? That's really important. We know this from the companions anhum, how they after Ramadan they would spend about 6 months asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept their fasting. Right? And then the following 6 months they'll make dua, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala balighna Ramadan, right? And that was to reach Ramadan. And similarly, when we talk about acts of worship such as Hajj and Umrah, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to enable us to get there. And then once we're there, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept from us. Wallahu a'lam. طيب. Now, part of the spiritual, we're done with spiritual preparation. Now I'm going to go into more of a mental preparation. And I'll be honest with you, this is something that's really important, right? And it's really important because even though spiritual preparation is part of the mental preparation, it's in it, but there are things that a bit maybe go beyond that a little bit. One thing, or a few things, we need to keep in mind, right, as we're embarking on this journey, is that we will feel stress, right? So we need to prepare ourselves for this, right? We will feel stress, um, or some people, I shouldn't say all, some people will feel a lot of stress because they want to make sure they perform everything perfectly. Okay? Now, that does have a mental toll on a person. The best way to help alleviate that is by educating ourselves with the fiqh of Hajj and Umrah. Because then you know for sure, all right, these are the pillars, I need to make sure I have those, right? And these are the mandatory actions. If I don't perform them or I miss them, act of worship is still accepted, but I have to do an expiation. And every else in between is sunnah, so if I miss it, it's okay, right? And if you don't know the difference, sometimes you miss a sunnah and you completely stress out and you're like, my hajj is gone, I didn't do this dua, this is so important. And no, it's actually a sunnah, you don't have to worry about it. So one of the things that we can do to alleviate the stress is to educate ourselves. Now, we also have to bear in mind that we will be, those who go on Hajj and Umrah, they will be in a place that has millions of people, right? They're coming in from different places around the world. They come with different cultural backgrounds, with different views, with different personalities, with different characters. And all these individuals will be wanting to perform that same ritual at the same time in a limited space. Okay? Which means that you will face upsetting behavior. You will face situations that would irritate you, right? That are caused by the ignorance or misguided behavior of others. You might be shoved and pushed, yelled at, right? You need to prepare yourself mentally that this is what's going to happen. This is not something you can avoid, right? So there's a difference between when you don't expect it and you expect it. When you expect it, you tend to react a bit better with it. It doesn't bother you as much, right? Now remember, we said we're doing this entire trip for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So we're going to be very watchful with our responses to these things. The last thing I'm going to mention to bear in mind in this category of mental preparation is that remember that you being on a Hajj trip inherently means that it will come with hardship. Hajj is one of those acts of worship that has multiple things involved. It has financial acts of worship, but heavily physical, right, acts of worship, which means that you will be faced with hardship in whatever way. And so remember, this is not a vacation, okay? It's not a vacation, so do not expect 5-star hotels with 5-star quality service, with, mashallah, the best customer service. No, right? That's not going to happen, right? Take that out of your head. You are in a trip that inherently will have difficulties, okay? If you go with the objective or the state of mind that I paid the highest package, right? I don't know how much is it now. 17? I was gonna guess 20. I was gonna say 20, right? But 17, that's still expensive. I remember when it used to be $4,000, but that's okay. طيب يا شيخ, alhamdulillah. All right, so that $17,000, when a person pays that, they're paying a lot of money, right? And living in a consumer society that we're in, when I pay $17,000, I expect services, okay? Not over there. That's not going to happen, okay? So don't think, yes, to some extent you get what you paid for, but this is once again not a vacation. Okay, it is not a vacation. So remove this whole aspect of relaxation, the best 5 stars accommodation, 5-star service. No, you will face hardship, right? Maybe not similar to other people who have the $8,000 package or $7,000 package, but still, you will encounter hardship. Right, so part of the mental preparation, I put a category on there, is to have realistic expectations. And I followed that after talking about don't expect the vacation 5-star, okay? So when I talk about being realistic expectations, don't expect things to move smoothly and on time. Not gonna happen, right? Remember, there's millions of people in a confined, limited space that are all trying to get to the same destination, right? Think of rush hour. You guys commute? You guys commute, right? Right? Do you like rush hour? You do? Who likes that? You guys don't like rush hour, right? You hate it. Okay? Some people are like, it's irritating. Now, this is 10 times worse. Okay, whatever delays you're gonna have rush hour, this is 10 times, if not even worse. So expect long delays, long waiting hours when moving from one point to another, from A to B. Long lines at bathrooms in Mina, in Muzdalifah, in Arafah, right? Because they can never have enough of these for people, right? Expect delays in food preparation, expect lack of personal space, impatience from others. Food is not going to be the top-notch quality, even if you paid $20,000, right? It might be a few days here and there, but in the end, it'll be also delayed. Wallahu alam. So those are more of realistic expectations. Now, things that can help, right? Can help with that mental preparation. Once again, remember what is the purpose of Hajj, right? The purpose of this trip is to have what is the purpose of this trip? It is to have an accepted Hajj, okay? And sometimes your Hajj is accepted because of the difficulty you went through and how well you acted with it, how patient you were, right? For the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Maybe that's the reason that your Hajj will be accepted, Allah alam. One thing that will also help with the mental aspect is to be content with what we have, right? One of the things that I've kind of heard and seen is different people with different Hajj groups looking at other Hajjis and their groups, right? And saying, look, how come they have this? Look, how come they have that? Realistically speaking, there is no perfect package. There isn't, okay? Yes, they might have something that is good, right? But you're forgetting you might have something that they might want, right? It might be the smaller group size. Allah alam. It might be you might have a better tour guide than they did, right? So which would reflect in better spiritual experience. Allah alam. But we should be content with what we have in that package, and always remember there are those who are less fortunate. There are those who cannot even have a package in the first place. Some actually would walk to Hajj. Some would do it on their own without any sort of guide, guaranteed place of staying in a hotel, or guaranteed time timing of food and meals. Those are individuals who still came to Hajj, right? The Prophet ﷺ, when it came to worldly things, he instructed us, he said, look at those who are less fortunate. You're more likely to appreciate or express gratitude to the blessings that you have. Always remember that, okay? The other thing is that we can remember that everyone has a different test, right? Even though if we're in the same Hajj group, each one of us is tested differently. And so this might be your test, whatever difficulty you're facing. And so also focus on that, right? One thing that helps is also if we try to think about others and help them in any way we can, right? Provide people with water, for example, share our food, whatever the case, things that we need, help elderly, children, some people come with younger kids, they need their help. So when you help one another, right, interestingly, it kind of helps, at the time of Hajj and Umrah, with our mental state, it kind of gives us this purpose, right? And it allows us to spring to different levels of resilience. Wallahu alam. One of the things that we should also, when we're talking about preparing mentally, mental preparation, is be ready not, and we should not, get into arguments or disputes or debates, especially fiqh debates. Remember, millions of people, different fiqh inclinations, okay? Don't, argue. You studied, you know what you have, that is one opinion. There are other opinions in there, right? And if somebody thinks that they are the most knowledgeable individual to argue with you, just put it to settle it down. If you have any doubts, all you got to do is find a scholar in your group, or there's fatwa committees all over the place in Hajj and Umrah. You can go ask them what you need. They'll answer you, and that's it. That's the end of it, okay? Now, the other thing that I cannot stress on that would help us mentally on this trip is patience, 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 and positive attitude. Okay? That is really important. I think I'll end that with the mental preparation. Now, when it comes to physical preparation, okay, so physical preparation is a bit of a combined thing that includes also part of it is the health preparation, right? So I'm going to ask Dr. Azhar if you can come kind of help with this portion. So part of the physical preparation is the health aspect of it, and then I'm going to add a few things, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. As-salatu was-salamu ala Rasulil Ameen. So congratulations, you are the chosen people. MashaAllah. So I just wanted to go over a few things. I happen to know that in 2006 we did Hajj together, but we didn't know each other at that time. And in 2011, I went there as a medical doctor for a group. So there's a few things I want to discuss. First of all, the preparation here. I think you should start walking. Start walking because there'll be so much walking over there, so you need physical fitness. So whatever days you are left, to start walking, number one. Number two, I would recommend to start maybe a week prior to leaving Airborne. Airborne is a vitamin C high dose or emergency C. You start taking that to build up your immunity. It's effervescent tablets or chewable as well. So you should take that so that your immunity is good when you reach there. Imagine 3 million people in 3 square miles. So it's a miracle in itself that despite that there are not serious illnesses, but obviously you have to have your immunity to prevent that. After, or actually before that, since it's a miracle, should start praying to Allah that may Allah keep you safe from all the diseases, illnesses, because again, so many people, respiratory illnesses are very common. Any person who comes back from the Umrah or Hajj is coughing, so it's most probable that you will get it, so start praying and obviously taking precautions of airborne. Then the vaccines, obviously the Hajj authorities might have told you what vaccinations are required. Even if it's not required, you should have flu vaccine. The requirement is meningitis vaccine, I think. Every year it changes. But flu vaccine you should get. If you can get hepatitis A vaccine, that will be good. Usually it's recommended to have it like 4 weeks or at least 2 weeks prior to traveling. It's not required, but to prevent yourself getting hepatitis. Other thing is typhoid vaccine. I mean, you can discuss with your physician that to avoid the foodborne illnesses, you can get the typhoid vaccine as well. The other important thing when you go there is obviously hand washing, because all the diseases are transmitted through hands. We touch our face, nose, mouth, so hand washing is very important. Keep washing your hands. Take hand sanitizer with you. Face mask, obviously, is an option. A lot of people, you'll see a lot of people wearing all the time, but obviously you should have the face mask when you are in closed space, at least wear at that time. Some people don't like it to wear it during tawaf and all that, and that's okay. But at least you should have it, ample amount of the face masks with you. Try and drink bottled water or Zamzam. In Zamzam, I would recommend you to be careful when you're using the cups over there. Although they have told all the people to, when you use it, you put it this way, and when you're not using it in that way, but some people, they cannot follow the directions, so just be careful that you're not using the cup which has already been used, because some diseases obviously will be transmitted through that. So the respiratory illness is obviously very common. For that, obviously, you have to, with all the precautions, make sure you have ample rest, you're very well hydrated. So these illnesses, most of the time, do not require antibiotics. Usually, they are cured by itself, but definitely take with you some throat lozenges, cough drops, all the over-the-counter medications. These are necessary. Cough drops are like your lifesaver over there. So Halls, Ricola, cough drops, those are very important. Chloroseptic lozenges, chloroseptic spray. You might get sore throat and all that, so you should take that with you. Definitely drink lots of fluids. You will be in the extreme heat month of June, so try and avoid the direct sun exposure. Umbrella, obviously you're not allowed, at some times you're not allowed to cover your head, so definitely umbrella would be very good. Try and avoid the direct exposure. Choose the time when there is not too much sun. You're doing the Umrah and all that, you can do it in the evening. Obviously, Arafat is Arafat, so that has to be done during the day. So the heat exhaustion, heat stroke are very common during this time. So heat exhaustion, you might feel very weak, fatigue, sometimes even nausea. So again, try to cool yourself off. Cold water, get your head, body, everywhere. If it is a heat stroke, then obviously very high temperature, and sometimes people get confused as well, so you have to be careful in identifying if heat stroke. Definitely you will require a lot of fluids, a lot of coolness, and it might not be a good idea to do it yourself. You have to get to the health facility there, hospital. Should also think about getting a travel insurance. It's a minimal amount so that if something happens, they take care of you without any problem. Usually the Hajj facilities over there are great. They try to treat you many serious things, and they try to make sure that you do the Hajj. You are at least able to do the Arafah. So don't worry about that, but I think it's a good idea to have health insurance. And when we went there, 2006 and 11, at that time, there was no prescription required. You can go to the medical store and get the medications, but I think what I have heard, now they require prescription for some antibiotics or some prescribed medications. So it'd be good that if you ask your doctors to take some medication, I'll tell you what medication you should take with you. The other common things which can happen when you start traveling is swollen ankles, feet and ankles. So when you start traveling, make sure when you're sitting on your seat, you keep moving your feet at least. So when you move your feet, this also helps your calves muscle, and the blood flow is going back upwards so that swelling is not there. Try to walk a little bit. Keep moving your feet. That's the most important thing. And if you walk and if you can elevate the feet, legs, that would be a good idea. If it happens there again, because you'll be traveling, walking, a lot of heat, so the ankle and feet can get swollen, but obviously elevation is the best thing. You might also get, especially men, for women, obviously you should wear socks with some paddings. There are socks available. But for men, when they're doing the tawaf, if they are not, during that time, if they are not allowed to wear the socks, they have to be careful. You can get some cracks. Things are sometimes drop, and there could be sharp things. So you should take some band-aids with you, clean it. Some antiseptic alcohol pads with you to clean it and put the band-aids. Also take Vaseline because the heels get cracked easily. That will be a good thing. For men also, when you are wearing ihram, it's very common for people to get some chafing when the thighs rub against each other. So again, the best thing is use Vaseline, take some antifungal powder. That would be helpful because it's very, very common. Some lubricants would be good as well. Now, over there, depending on how the rooms are given, sometimes you share the rooms with other people, and obviously somebody might be snoring and you're not able to sleep, so taking earplugs would be good. Also, during the travel as well, on the plane, when you're doing that, the earplugs would be helpful so that you don't get barrel pressure. The eardrum gets like full pressure over there, so that would be helpful. So the antibiotics, I think you should ask your physician to give you some antibiotics which might be needed over there, which you can take it from here. Common medication would be Zithromax, it's a common antibiotic, amoxicillin or Augmentin if you get throat infection or upper respiratory infection. Cipro and Flagyl for like a traveler's diarrhea or if you get food poisoning over there. Although the food is pretty good, but still, there's always a possibility. Take obviously Tylenol, Advil, the Bengay or a sports cream because your muscle might get cramped. That would be helpful. Take Pepto, Pepto-Bismol and Imodium for diarrhea if you get that. And very important thing, especially in Mina and Muzdalfa and Arafah, do not overeat. They provide you a lot of food, but control yourself, don't overeat. Water is fine, as much as water, because if you have diarrhea over there, it'll be so difficult. The lines are long, and obviously Arafah is your, Hajj. So try and avoid, but drink lots of water, especially during this month of June. As I told earlier, some cold drop, the cough drops and the chloroseptic spray. You can take some allergy medications. These are over-the-counter, Claritin, Zyrtec, Allegra, just in case if you get some allergies there. Mucinex is a good cough medication. Also, it comes in liquid and the tablet form. That's good. People who have asthma, make sure you have a couple of inhalers with you because sometimes when you go for Mina, they'll ask you to pack very small. Make sure you have all these medications with you because when you are in the hotel, it's very easy to go down and get over-the-counter stuff from the pharmacies, but in Mina, there is only one pharmacy, and I don't know how far you would be from that pharmacy. And Arafah, obviously, there is nothing there. So all these things should be in your small package when you prepare that for Mina and Arafah. I mentioned earlier the antifungal cream. Can also take some Neosporin ointment, again with the cracks on the heels and all that, that will be good. Other stuff would be Pedialyte or oral rehydration salt. Because of the dehydration, these are good things which are available. You can take that with you. If you have existing medical condition, obviously you should have all your medications. Should ask your doctor to write what medications you have so that it's with you. God forbid if something happens, that the people are able to know what your diseases are, what medications you are taking. For the diabetics, it's very important to have something with you all the time, meaning sugar and all that stuff, or candies, because your travel might be, you're thinking you'll be there in 4 hours, it might get delayed to 8 hours, 10 hours. Now that trains are there, it's probably not going to happen, but some might still take bus, and all bets are off when you're on bus. So make sure if your sugar is going down, you have the stuff to bring it up, and obviously all other medications. For the high blood pressure, again, make sure you have the medication. If you have blood pressure monitor, similarly with the blood sugar, if you have a blood sugar monitor. Now they have, the sticky thing with the monitor, you can check your blood sugar, so that would be very essential. So I think for women, I think you should contact with your gynecologist, obstetrician, if you want to delay the periods and all that. So there are medications available which can delay the periods, and definitely they will help you with that. So that's about it. If you have any question, I'll be available. You can ask me later, or if any question right now, I can be able to help. Jazakallah khair. Something?
جزاهم الله خير دكتور أزهر. So, this is the physical preparation. Dr. Azhar had a good overview of it. I'm going to go into the fiqh preparation, right? I'm going to go lightly over it, skip it, because we're going to go with details into fiqh. But essentially, fiqh preparation, that whole aspect of it, is really to ensure that our Hajj and Umrah is performed correctly, and that the only way this would happen is if we actually study it, right, and go over it. And that obviously is done by educating ourselves, whether we attend a seminar or we listen to something online, right? That's also beneficial. Now, there are other things when we talk about fiqh preparation. Honestly, there are other things that we should brush up on in addition to Hajj and Umrah, right? So one of them is learning the fiqh of funeral prayers. Because if you're at a Masjid al-Haram or a Masjid Nabawi, believe me when I tell you, almost after every prayer there's Salat Janazah, right? So you're going to be performing a whole lot of Salat Janazahs. So it's a good idea to brush up on your fiqh of how to pray Salat Janazah, what are the pillars of it, and so forth. And the other thing is, it's a good idea probably in that preparation is to at least commit to memory some of the adhkar from the from the Quran or dua that you want to memorize. Prepare ahead of time. Believe me when I tell you, a lot of people, and they're not prepared, the minute they reach the Kaaba, their brain goes blank. Like, what should I make a dua for, right? They just can't remember. And subhanAllah, it maybe perhaps is the awness of the situation of being in the presence of the Kaaba, that a person almost is mesmerized, they kind of forget what to do. So commit to memory ahead of time. A group of du'as, authentic du'as from the Prophet ﷺ, from the Quran and the Sunnah, or things that you want to make du'a for. One other thing that's important to kind of learn, because you are going to be in a state of travel, brush up on the fiqh of travel, right? The concessions that are there, that are required, the number of days of like, shortening the prayers and so forth, okay? I'm going to leave the fiqh preparation at that. Now, the financial preparation, really what that entails mostly is a really strong advice to consider writing a will, an Islamic will, right? And that is really important because Allahu Alam what happens, right? Especially if you, like many others that live in this first world country, we have debts, right? Especially if these debts are not documented, if specifically we owe an individual some money that we have forgotten about, make sure you write this down in your will so that it can be taken from your inheritance before it gets distributed, because the last thing you want is somebody's debt not fulfilled. The Prophet ﷺ warned against this, right? So we have to make sure that if there's some sort of debt that at least has been written, documented, so your family members can take care of it. Wallahu alam. Right. The other thing when we talk about financial planning is we need to make sure that if we're leaving family behind, that we leave enough money for them so that they can utilize it in our absence until we get back. At the same time, we have to make sure that we take enough money with us to Hajj and Umrah, right, in the Hajj trip. Now, I can't tell you how much is enough. It really depends on how much, well, I guess your personal needs, right? How much gifts you're planning to buy, what are you planning to shop for over there, your personal needs. That will really determine how much you take with. But one thing that's interesting is that, generally speaking, the exchange rate is very similar. Like, there's not a huge difference. I was told that the larger the bill that you have, the better the exchange rate, slightly. I don't know why, right? So if you're gonna, change $20 bills, you might get a better deal if it's a $100 bill, right? Allah alam. One thing I would also advise is to take one credit card as an emergency, which means you don't put it with the rest of your money, because it's not an emergency if you lose both, right? So you want to keep that on the side somewhere in a safe place, separate from your cash, so that in case if you need or you lose your cash, you can use that credit card. Allah alam. So that is the financial aspect preparation. And the last part of the preparation in that part one is what's called logistic preparation. Now, logistic preparation, I can spend an entire hour, right, talking about this. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a link, right? I went over it. It's kind of nice. And it's called hajjumrahplanner.com. Right? Hajj, H-A-J-J, Umrah, U-M-R-A-H, planner, P-L-A-N-N-E-R.com. And there's a checklist on there. So if you go /checklist/ they'll give you a checklist, right? It's an exhaustive checklist. But one thing you want to remember is that the lighter you travel, the better, right? The lighter you travel, the better. And if you forget anything, don't worry. You're not going to be in a desert, okay? You're going to be in a city with lots of stores and lots of shop, and people want to sell you stuff whether you need it or not. So, once again, you can even go without any sort of clothing, just your ihram with you and a couple of articles of clothes, you will be fine, right? So whatever you forget, it's okay, don't worry about it. Use the website. I think it's kind of nice because it has different categories. It has pictures, even the steps of Hajj and Umrah. There might be different fiqh opinions of what I'm going to mention, but that's okay. But it can be a useful tool, inshallah. In there also, they talk about cell phones. It's a great idea to, if you have, I know T-Mobile for sure, you can pay certain fees and you can actually use it over there. I don't know about other services, I'll be honest with you. I have two services. I depended on T-Mobile, and it worked perfect, worked excellent. I had no problems making phone calls, receiving texts, whether to the States or even within Saudi Arabia. You will need your phone occasionally just to maintain contact, view things. Alternatively, if your phone has an exchangeable SIM card, you can, just when you get there, you'll find certain booths. They will sell certain SIM cards. You can exchange it buy one and put it in there, or you can buy an entire flip phone. You don't really need your smartphone, right? Downgrade just for the trip, get a bit flip phone from there. But there's multiple options, but you need to plan ahead with that cell phone. Wallahu a'lam. طيب. Now, the last part of the preparation is just touching, and I'm going to use that as a springboard to the extensive fiqh aspects. When we talk about Hajj and Umrah, specifically because people are going to Hajj, there are 3 different forms of Hajj. Right? Tawsif, what are they? The what? Yes, that's correct. Tamattu', Qiran, and Ifrad. Okay, good, excellent, right? So those are the 3 types of Hajj, which means those are the 3 types where you could make an intention you're going to enter into Hajj. And the difference between them is, one, whether there's a Umrah associated with it or not. And if there's a Umrah associated with it, how it's going to be conducted. Okay? So, Tamattu', essentially it is to perform Umrah first. Okay, complete Umrah during the months of Hajj. Right? What is the month of Hajj? Just that's it? Well, first of all, it's not all of Dhul Hijjah. It's the first few days of Dhul Hijjah, right? All right. Because essentially you can't do Umrah in Hajj. You got to be before that. Okay, good. And then what about Dhul Qa'dah? Is that a month of Hajj? Excellent, mashallah, good answer, right? What about Shawwal? I know it's we don't think about it, but I want you to think a long time ago, right? When people wanted to travel for Hajj, when did they start traveling? Huh? In Shawwal. They would start traveling in Shawwal. And so Shawwal is considered from the months of the season of Hajj. Right? So Shawwal, Dhul Qa'dah, and the first few days of Dhul Hijjah. So if you perform a Umrah in that time period completely, so that's the Tamattu', you perform a Umrah in that time period, and then leaving your state of Ihram. So you enter the state of Ihram, perform all the rituals of Umrah, and then after you're done, in a few days, you go into another state of Ihram to perform your Hajj. That is Tamattu'. And this is the type that the Prophet ﷺ recommended his Sahaba to perform. In fact, he ordered them, whomever performed a Qaran, I'm going to mention what that is, and did not bring his sacrificial animal with them, he ordered them to perform a Umrah and exit the state of Ihram. Right? Now, which brings us to the second type of Hajj, which is Qaran. Qaran, which means to couple together, right? Yaqrin, which means to bring 2 things together. And essentially, this is what it is. You perform Umrah and Hajj together without leaving the state of Ihram between them. So once you start until you end Hajj, you're in a state of Ihram. So if you started it in Dhul Qa'dah, right, you are going to be in a state of Ihram from Dhul Qa'dah until the day of Eid, until you finish your actual rituals, right, which is a long time. And this is the type that the Prophet ﷺ performed, right? And he performed that because when he started from Medina, he brought his sacrificial animals with him. Okay? So remember, these companions that didn't bring their sacrificial animals, he told them, get out of your ihram, perform umrah, and then go back into Hajj. But the Prophet ﷺ, because he brought his sacrificial animals with him, he maintained the umrah and Hajj together. Okay? The last one is al-ifrad, right? Which is just performing Hajj on its own, without a Umrah. And really, this is mostly relevant for people who live around Mecca, right? For people who live in other countries, come into, Saudi Arabia from outside, usually, it is an opportunity, and most of them will perform a Hajj and a Umrah in that same time. And so many will either perform a Quran or Tamattu', but the majority will perform Tamattu'. So the majority of people perform Tamattu'. And so that being said, I'm going to start first assuming that most people will do Umrah first and then Hajj. I'm going to talk about the fiqh of Umrah and a step-by-step of the fiqh of Umrah. All right? Now, most packages, you have one or two choices. Either going to Medina first, spending a few days, and then going to Mecca to perform Hajj, right? Umrah and Hajj. Obviously, so a few days before, the eighth day of Dhul Hijjah, they arrive, let's say, on the 5th of Dhul Hijjah or the 6th of Dhul Hijjah. They perform Umrah and then they wait until the 8th of Dhul Hijjah. The other package is that they would go to Mecca first, perform their Umrah, perform their Hajj, and then go to Medina, right? Either or, right? We're going to go through the fiqh of Umrah. Right, now, when we talk about the fiqh of Umrah, the way I divided it is because we're looking at an act of worship. Any of act of worship, we need to look at the prerequisites, the pillars, the obligatory actions of it, and perhaps some people will discuss the nullifiers. We're going to touch on that. But because we're just addressing this the first time, I'm also going to talk about the prohibitions of ihram, right? Going to ihram, the prohibitions of ihram. And I'm going to talk about the prerequisites of tawaf, prerequisites of sa'i, and then the step-by-step process of umrah from the beginning to the end. And that really will help later on when we start the Hajj part. We already finished the tawaf with its prerequisites. We studied already. We don't have to repeat it again. And the sa'i with its prerequisites, but also the ihram, which is prohibitions, and so forth. Okay, so at least a huge bulk will be done, which is going to be left with the procedures of Hajj. And the way I'm going to do it is, on the first day, this is what we're doing, and the second day, and so forth. Okay. While we're talking about Umrah, we're going to talk about the miqat. We're also going to talk about the boundaries of Mecca, in case a person was already there and they want to do another Umrah, and so forth. طيب. So, when we talk about the prerequisites, right? The prerequisites of Umrah, prerequisites are things that are not part of the actual act of worship, right? When we talk about prerequisites, in Arabic they're called shurut. So they're not part of the actual act of worship. However, they're things that need to be present prior to starting the act of worship, maintained throughout the act of worship, until the completion of the act of worship, okay? An example for that, one of the prerequisites of salah is tahara, right? You need to maintain your ritual purification, your tahara, before you start the prayer, the salah, during the salah, until the end of your salah. Is that right? Without that, can you start salah? No. If you lose your tahara in the middle, can you continue your salah? No, right? So this is what we're talking about prerequisites. So when we're talking about prerequisites of Umrah, so these are the prerequisites that Umrah becomes mandatory, okay? There is a difference of opinion between scholars whether Umrah is mandatory or not. Of course, there is a consensus that Hajj is mandatory once in a lifetime, but almost there is a split, like a 50-50 split almost, if I'm not wrong, whether Umrah is also obligatory or not, right? So many of the scholars will tell you Umrah is also obligatory once in a lifetime. Other scholars will tell you that it is not obligatory, right? But it is recommended to perform. Nonetheless, you're going anyway, so perform it, right? Even if you performed it before, there's no reason not to perform it again. Once again, the virtues of performing multiple umrahs is that the sins in between are expiated, and poverty is eliminated, and so forth, with other virtues associated with it. Now, the prerequisite for the Umrah to be obligatory on an individual, there's 5 prerequisites, and those are the same 5 prerequisites for also Hajj. Right, so essentially we're covering both at the same time. 3 of them are, or I should say 4. 4 of them are similar in every act of worship. Okay, that includes Islam. Actually, I shouldn't say 3 are unanimous. 1 is not. 1 is specific. And the 5th one we're going to talk about. So Islam, sanity, and adulthood. Because we're talking about acts of worship being mandatory, okay? It becomes mandatory upon us to perform Hajj and Umrah, right? If we are Muslim, sane adults. Does that mean that the Umrah of a person who has not reached the age of puberty, it means it's not accepted? No, it doesn't mean that. We should differentiate between the acceptance of the act of worship and the act of worship being mandatory. 2 different things. Okay? A child who is actually even for Hajj and Umrah, right? Even an infant, if the parent makes an intention for them, they get the reward, but it doesn't suffice for the mandatory Umrah or mandatory Hajj. They get the reward of it as a nafl. When they reach adulthood or puberty, it is obligatory for them to perform it. So once again, Islam, sanity, and adulthood. Right? The fourth prerequisite, which is different than other acts of worship, is that it's mandatory on a person only if they're free. And I know this is something that is usually not quite often discussed, but we're discussing it because it's mentioned in the books of fiqh. A person who is not free, right? Who is who is considered a slave or so forth, it is not mandatory upon them. Now, the fifth condition is the ability to perform it, right? You are only obligated to perform Hajj and Umrah if you are able to perform it. And that ability includes things such as having travel provisions. In that category, they would include things such as being able to have provisions that include food, drink, clothing, a place to stay when you get there, right? All these things are considered part of the provisions, or the ability, travel provisions under the category of ability. The other thing they discuss is having a means of transportation, okay? Having a means of transportation. So if you are physically able to walk there, it's not mandatory upon you to perform Hajj, right? We're talking about a suitable means of transportation. If you're capable of having that, then it becomes mandatory. Financial ability is included in the ability, and that means that you have the financial ability without hindering other financial obligations, right? Without hindering other financial obligations. Now, under the ability, the majority of scholars, let me rephrase that, many of the scholars will put underneath that for females, right? Part of the ability is to have a mahram that can travel with them, okay? And this, and it comes up a lot. Does she have to take a mahram with her? The people who say yes, that becomes part of her part of what would make it mandatory, which means that if she has no mahram, it's no longer obligatory upon her to perform Hajj or Umrah, okay? Other scholars will say that what is only required is that she is able to be accompanied by safe company, right? Safe company. And that is the opinion of a Shafi'i, provided that it is the mandatory Hajj and Umrah, right? Mandatory Hajj and Umrah. So the Hajj al-Islam and the Umrah, that is mandatory. If it's a nafl, then no, right? Then in the Shafi'i's opinion, it is prohibited for a female to travel without a mahram to perform Hajj and Umrah in this case, right? طيب. So those are the prerequisites. How many prerequisites are there? You forgot already. 5. Good, excellent, right? 3 of them are common between every act of worship, which are Islam, sanity, and adulthood. Good, excellent. The other one that is freedom, and last one is ability. Good, excellent. All right, now the pillars of Umrah. Right now, when we talk about a pillar in Arabic, it's called rukn. A pillar is part of the act of worship, and it cannot be omitted. It cannot be omitted, whether you forgot, or you were ignorant, or it was a mistake. You're not. This is not. You will never exit your state of ihram, or your act of worship is considered correct unless you fulfill those pillars. And in Umrah, there's only 3 pillars. Right? How many pillars are there in Umrah? 3. Okay, 3 pillars. And in Arabic, it's called rukn. Right? So these 3 pillars are ihram, tawaf, and sa'i. Okay. So ihram essentially is the intention of entering into a state of prohibiting specific things that used to be permissible prior to entering a state of ihram. Okay? That's why it's called ihram. Ihram, which means you make something haram. Okay? When you enter that state, things that were normally halal for you are no longer allowed. Okay, so you're entering that state. So that is the ihram. that is a pillar. Tawaf around the Kaaba 7 times, and sa'i between Safa and Marwa 7 times. Okay? So these are the pillars. Now, obligatory actions are also actions within the act of worship. However, the difference between them and the pillars is that if these actions were omitted, okay, it does not invalidate your act of worship. However, you need a form of expiation in order to validate your act of worship. So this expiation usually is in the form of offering a sacrificial animal, either a sheep or a goat, and they call it dam, which means blood, sacrificial, like blood that you present. So if you miss or you omit that obligatory action, then this is the expiation for it. In Umrah, there is only 2, right? Umrah is very simple, like 3 pillars, 2 obligatory actions. That's it. And those 2 obligatory actions are to perform or go into a state of ihram from the miqat. Okay? If you're outside the limits. Okay? If you're outside the limits. Now, if you are in Mecca, then you need to leave the sanctuary of Mecca in order to go into the state of ihram. And the closest one is known as what? Well, they call it Masjid Aisha. That is true. So they refer to it as Masjid Aisha. It has another name. It's called, I forgot what's it called. No. Sorry, what did you say? Tan'im. Tan'im. It's called Tan'im. At-Tan'im. That's what it's known by. But yes, sometimes people call it Masjid Aisha. It is Tan'im, it's the closest one. So if at the borders of Mecca, right? So this is the area that's called the Haram. So you need to leave the sanctuary area if you're in Mecca, in order, if you want to do Umrah, to perform outside of it. And the closest one is the Tan'im, right? And it's, how far is it? I would say almost 3 miles from the Kaaba, 3 miles approximately. Actually 4.6 miles, 4.6. The other ones, there's several ones, right? There's like, there's Hudaybiyah, people know that. There's Arafah itself, that's considered outside the boundaries. People can do, if they're there, they can do Ihram for Umrah. There is the Ji'rana, which is another area, but that's a bit further. And there is the, what else? Sorry? Did you say something? All right. But anyway, most people go Tan'im, right? So you can just hop in a cab or a taxi, say Tan'im. However, right, if you are actually closer to Mina, I think Arafah might be closer, right? Unless you want to head to the other direction and just cross over to Tan'im and come back again. That is also possible. Allah. طيب. So, those are the prerequisites, pillars, and obligatory actions of the Umrah. Now, because we talked about a state of Ihram, okay? Essentially, if you are coming, yes? Oh, I only said one of them, right? Okay, I'm sorry. Ihram. I apologize. The second one is cutting your hair or shaving for men. For women, it is removing... it is trimming, essentially. It's called trimming. But also for men, it should be from all parts of your head if you're going to cut it. Because you are going to go into Hajj, it's usually recommended to leave some hair to shave later on. So you cut your hair in the Umrah, shave it for Hajj. For the ladies, you trim both times, for Umrah and for Hajj. And how much you trim, essentially you can gather all your hair to one side. If it's not in a form of, if it's not braided. If it's braided, then just grab each braid and cut about almost this much of it, right? So in Arabic it's called uqla. You cut this much of it, just trim it, just one side and then the other. If it's not like braided, then just collect all of it and then just trim the end of it, okay? There is a difference of opinion about this, okay? But you want to stay on the safe side. practice the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ and the companions, this is what they used to do. Right? So the two obligatory actions are making ihram from the miqat. So in this case, people going to Medina, right? The closest miqat is called Abyar Ali, right? Dhul Hulayfa. Now it's called Abyar Ali. That will be the closest miqat to Medina, but it's also the furthest miqat from Mecca. The furthest miqat from Mecca is Dhul Hulayfa. There are other parts where essentially like a boundary, right, where you're not supposed to cross. So once again, Dhul Hulayfa or Abyar Ali, those are people coming from mostly from Medina, right? And it's once again the furthest distance to Mecca. If people are coming from a bit more the west side, right, and right below that, those are people coming from North Africa, Syria, Europe. They're supposed to perform, not cross, the miqat close to Al-Juhfa. Right, so that's the second miqat. There's 5 in total, 5 or 6. We'll go over them. So there is Dhul Hulayfa, and then Al-Juhfa from the people coming from the north, and then Qarn al-Manazil for the ones who are coming from Najd, which is Riyadh. That is actually on the other side. Yalamlam is in the bottom. Those are people coming from Yemen. And then there is that Irq. So that is how many so far? Dhul Hulayfa, Al-Juhfa, Qarn al-Manazil, Yalamlam, and that Irq. 5. Right? So that Irq is people coming from Iraq area. From that area. Right? So those are the 5 areas. But most people, right, if you're traveling by air, if you're going to go to Mecca first, right, you're going to go for Umrah, and you intend to go to Mecca, the issue is, if you intend to go to Mecca, you should not enter except in a state of ihram. Most people will land in Jeddah. That is after the miqat, which means you need to perform your ihram on the plane. Okay? It is easy for sisters, more difficult for the brothers because they have to take off their clothes, wear their ihram in the air as they're going through, right? And so it's almost like between Al-Juhfa and Yalamlam, right? Al-Juhfa is here, Yalamlam is at the bottom, Jeddah is right there, right? Closer to Mecca. So usually if it's on a Muslim commercial airlines, you remind the pilot or you ask the stewardess to remind the pilot, and they will tell you we are approaching the miqat. Okay? But be careful, it happens very quickly. So the mandatory action over here for Umrah is to perform ihram from the miqat. Now, what happens if you pass the miqat and did not perform your ihram? Go back and perform your ihram and then, continue. What if you crossed the miqat and went into a state of ihram? Slaughter an animal, excellent, because you did not perform a mandatory action, right? Excellent. So when we talk about ihram, we'd have to talk usually about the prohibitions of ihram. So these are things that you're not supposed to be doing, and there is about 9 of them. We can group them into 7, right? But I'm gonna just expand them into 9. And those are really based on in the Hanbali school of thought, right? Obviously some are agreed upon, and some might have different opinion, but generally these are all agreed upon. So the first one, right, is removal of hair from any parts of your body. Okay, removal of hair from any parts of your body. So which means when you go into a state of ihram, you have to be very careful, right, when you brush your hair, essentially, okay? If you know for sure, right, that you, lost hair, they have, in the Hanbali school of thought, they have a system. So if you purposely, right, remove one hair, or by accident because you brushed your hair, if it's 1 hair or 2 hairs, then based on that number, if it's 1 hair, then you feed 1 poor person. If 2 hairs, then you feed 2 poor people. What you feed is, it's called a sa', right? Actually, you know what, actually for 2 hairs. It is called half a sa'. A sa' is a container of volume that is composed of 4 palm lengths. So you feed each poor person 2 of those palm lengths. of either raisins or dried dates or like aqit or the things that you generally give from food for zakat al-fitr. All right. Now, 3 hairs and more is where you have to do one of 3 things. Okay. So this is the expiation of removing 3 hairs or more purposely. You have a choice of doing one of 3 things. What are they? Actually, you know this. Slaughter animal. Fasting how many days? 3 days. Last choice. Feeding how many? 6 people. All right. 6 people. Right. Each one half a saw. Right. So those are, like, you have a choice between them. Okay. So this is if we're talking about removal of hair. If you purposely remove any hair of your body in your state of ihram, okay, or you allow somebody to remove it, or you realize and you're for sure you know that you by mistake, like, beyond 3 hairs fell out and you see them, then you have one of 3 choices: fast 3 days, feed 6 people, or slaughter an animal, either a sheep or a goat. Okay. Yes. No. That's it. Just by you're shedding, right? No. I'm talking about something that you did, not naturally that you're there. So be careful when you brush your hair. Just be careful when you brush your hair. Listen, for Umrah it's not a problem. For Umrah it's very easy, right? Why? Because if you're going to go from Medina, right, the minute you cross your miqat, you're already wearing your hijab. You're not going to take anything off until you're done. Everything's done in one day, right? We'll go over Hajj days, right? Yes. Most of the time, the least of your concern will be brushing your hair during Hajj. No, by choice, right? So this is Surah Al-Baqarah, right? فَفِدْيَةٌ مِّن صِيَامٍ أَوْ صَدَقَةٍ أَوْ نُسُكٍ. That's called fidya, an expiation, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave a choice between those 3 in this situation, right? Now, the other thing you're prohibited from doing, prohibition of ihram, is clipping your nails, okay? The expiation for clipping a nail is similar as the hair, okay? Now, provided, of course, when we talk about these things, we're talking about this is not a situation of necessity, right? So, for example, if you if you broke a nail and it's bothering you and you take it off, that is a situation of necessity. There's no expiation for that, okay? There's a hair coming out from somewhere like from your eye and you got to remove it because it's already removing it. That is fine, okay? So we're talking about not a situation where it's not a necessity. So first one is removal of hair from any parts of your body, clipping your nails. The third one is specifically for males. Males intentionally wearing fit-forming clothes, right? Fit-forming clothing, and that would include things such as socks, shoes, and the likes. Okay? So when you enter in that state of ihram, make sure that you either remove your clothing first and wear your rida and izar, right? Or immediately remove your clothing after you go into state of ihram, all right? Now, you are allowed in your state of ihram to tie something around you to secure your money or your wealth, okay? In the Hamdi school of thought, they're pretty strict about this. So it has to be for money purposes or securing your wealth. Gold, diamonds, whatever you feel like you want to carry with you on that trip that is considered wealth. It has to be that. You can put obviously your cell phone with it. That's not a problem. You can put other things with it. But this is one thing you can use to kind of tie around. Yes? Passport would be considered wealth. No. Right? It would not be considered wealth. But most people have their money in there and they put the passport and their phone with it. Right? Because remember, after you finish, you gotta get your hair cut. You have to have money with you, right? So it's an excuse to put everything else with it along. So it's okay. Don't just walk around with your passport, right? Um, some people, what they do is, if they go from Medina to Mecca, once they arrive Mecca, they're in their hotel rooms, there's safes in the rooms. They leave it there, right? A lot of times, because their rooms are going to be there. Nobody's using it. And so they leave it there and then they go to Mina because they're just kind of worried that if they leave it in the tent, something would happen to it, la samahullah. And so most people will leave it as safe in the hotel room, right? طيب. By the way, part of the form fitted, so some of the ihrams I've seen, they actually have clips on the ihram, right? Males, you cannot use that clip. You cannot put buttons on there to kind of, because then it becomes form fitted. But wrapping it around and wearing a belt to secure your money, that's the objective of it, that is fine, okay? Yes? That should not be the purpose. So if you notice, that belt is not intended to keep your ihram, right? It is intended to have your money on there. But there's a way to wrap it that it makes it very, very secure, right? Unfortunately, I don't have one with me to show you, but essentially you're rolling it, right? So you let it, when you first wrap it, you let it go long, right? And then you start folding, 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 folding. No matter what you do afterwards, it's not going to go loose, right? It's the Yemeni way of wrapping it, if I'm not mistaken, right? And until this day, they wear an izar, and they're very accustomed to it. Wallah a'lam. طيب. Oh, by the way, for males, also when you wear the rida, right, in your state of ihram, you don't have to show your shoulder, your right shoulder. You cover your shoulders. You only need to show your right shoulder once you start doing your tawaf. Okay? That's it. And then you can cover it, especially in prayers. Yes? Mm-hmm. So many of the contemporary scholars will tell you it's okay. Right? Those bags are fine. Like backpacks, string bags, things like that, things you can put on your shoulder, those are considered okay. طيب. Yes. So when they're doing their tawaf of Umrah, right, they should show their right shoulder. Once they're done with the tawaf, they just cover it. Or if they stop for prayers, they cover it. During the sa'i, it's covered. They don't have to show their right arm. Okay? We'll get to the tawaf later on. Now, for a person who wears form-fitted clothing, right, who maintains it, for example, or yes. What about shoes? You're supposed to wear sandals. Yes. So So when they talk about so the Prophet ﷺ said you should not wear, for example, a khuf. So this is something that covers the toes, the top of your foot, your ankles, and your heels. Okay? So sneakers, for example, that's not allowed. Crocs will definitely not be allowed, for example, right? The likes of those things that mostly cover huge parts of your feet, right? Mainly those areas we're talking about, the toes, the top of your feet, the ankles, and the heels. That is what is prohibited. Some sandals are huge, like the considered sandals, like Crocs, for example. That is not, because that is essentially like form-fitting, right? So look for sandals that that would not have these qualities or attributes. And yes, sometimes it's difficult to find. And by the way, when we talk about form-fitting, it's a mistake to think that stitches are not allowed. Like people say it has to be plastic. That is not true. right? It's just a word, they said makhit. Makhit in Arabic got translated to stitches. Makhit, which means that it's been tailored to a form of a body. That's what it means. And so even if you have sandals, if it has stitches in it, that is fine. Okay? Wallah a'lam. طيب. So the expiation for garments, if a person maintains it on or whatever the case is the same as the expiation for a removal of hair, right? So a choice between fasting, feeding, or sacrificial animal. Now the fourth prohibition, also for males, is that they are not allowed to cover their head, including their ears. Okay, they're not allowed to cover their head, including their ears. What about their faces? Men, are they allowed to cover their faces? Actually, they are. They are, right? Because that's not in the prohibition, right? Sisters, another case, we'll talk about that, okay? So, for the males, intentionally covering their head is prohibited, okay? Something that sticks on their head. Some scholars would go to the extent that it would include things that are very low to your head, right? But we'll, we'll go with the other opinion of scholars because then your life becomes very difficult, right? Because, for example, if you're sitting in a car and it's close to your head, they'll say that's not allowed, right? And that is a very valid opinion. But many of the scholars will tell you that that's not included in there, just things that you cover your head with, right? And if a person continues to do that, then you have to make an expiation of either fasting or feeding or sacrificial animals. What are you looking for, Sheikh? So remember, one school of thought will tell you no, right? Others will tell you it's okay because it's not on your head. But stay away from the umbrella that you kind of wear this, and it's kind of I've seen people wear that in Hajj, that you should not wear that, right? Now, covering your head also including, be careful when you're sleeping. Some people like to cover their head with a cover. Don't do that. That's covering your head, right? For males. Sisters, you're off the hook, right? No, ya Sheikh. Talking about covering your ears. Yeah, okay, so how do you want to sleep? Right or left? Your ears are gonna hit a pillow, like so. But no, that's what we're talking. We're talking about actual, something that you wear that would cover, right? Earmuffs, for example, right? The headphones that people wear, stuff like that. Obviously, it doesn't include hearing aids because that doesn't cover your ear. Hearing aids are fine, glasses are fine, sunglasses are fine. All these things are okay. For females, the prohibition comes from, yes. For men, it's fine. Yes, but it's one of those things. There's a difference of opinion, right? If you can avoid it, and I know this is contrary to the advice of doctors, but for men, it's a lot easier. When it comes to sisters, it's a bit different because when we talk about sisters, what's prohibited for them is covering their face, for example, with something such as a niqab or a burqa, right? Now, that's not to mistaken that it means that you're prohibited to cover your face, because the reality is two schools of thought believe that covering the face is mandatory. So what do? That's why they specified. The Prophet ﷺ specified, he said, niqab or burqa. Niqab is a form fitted on the face. So that is one way of covering the face. But the other way they used to cover their face is to bring down above their head a piece of cloth that goes down. That is permissible, but only allowed when necessary, which is in the presence of other strange men. In the absence of those strange men, they're not allowed to cover their face, okay? Also, part of the prohibition is wearing gloves, okay? Now, does that mean that they should not cover their hands? Once again, there's two schools of thought that tell you even the women's hand needs to be concealed, which means that they can cover it with their sleeves. That's why a long time ago, most of the sleeves for women were long, right? Because they would use that to cover their hands. Now, for the covering or whatever the case is, once again, the expiation is like that of the removal of hair and clipping and so forth. The fifth prohibition is fragrances. What time is Maghrib? Oh, it's already Maghrib time. طيب. I don't know, but your clocks are, we still got 2 minutes. See, then was the 8:11, but you guys go with another app that delays 2 more minutes, right? I'll take those 2 more minutes. So, the fifth prohibition of ihram is fragrances. Now, the fragrance you're not allowed to put in your state of ihram. Does that mean you're not allowed to put it before going in the state of ihram? No, it is fine. But be careful. If it goes on your ihram, if it goes on your ihram, if you take it off, you cannot put it back again. Right? It's a lot more complicated for men because especially when they're top one, sometimes they take it off, it falls. If that has fragrance on it, don't put it back on. Just take out another one that you kept in your backpack or out of the cases and wear it. So for men, it's usually advisable to at least have 2 sets, right? At least have 2 sets with you. So this is fragrance. And so that includes also trying to avoid in your state of ihram, fragrant soap, shampoo, scented, Vaseline, stuff like that. Just avoid those. The expiation for that is similar as the expiation for cutting the hair and clipping and so forth. All right. Now, the 6th and the 7th. All right, I'm going to have to go PG. Relations with spouses, right? And I'm talking about relation with spouses that would require performing a ghusl ritual, right? The purification. So that is prohibited. And if that happens in a state of ihram, if umrah, it is done before completing your sa'i, it nullifies your umrah. If it happens in hajj before getting out of the major state of ihram, then it also nullifies your hajj, right? The 8th one, or is that the 6th? 6th. The 7th one is foreplay, right? That is also prohibited. Okay, so foreplay is also prohibited. The 8th prohibition is hunting wild animals, which I highly doubt any of you will be doing over there. Just refrain from killing other animals. Doesn't mean you cannot kill insects. Doesn't mean you cannot kill, those things. Those are not considered game animals. The 9th prohibition and last one is performing nikah contracts. So either you yourself getting married, or giving somebody to marriage, or officiating the contract, or being the guardian in the contract, right? Any of those things, that renders in the Hanbali school of thought at least, it renders the contract invalid, but it's also one of the prohibitions, okay? There is no expiation for this, but it's a prohibition, okay? Now, I don't think that's one of the things, a lot of times it's not mentioned because most people don't think of, getting married in Hajj or Umrah. But nonetheless, it should be mentioned for prohibitions, right? So those are the prohibitions. Are you guys okay continuing afterwards? Are you tired? You're good? All right, khalas. We'll start with the prerequisites of tawaf, and then the prerequisites of sa'i, and then the step-by-step of Umrah, inshallah. Okay? All right. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam ala Muhammadin wa ala alihi ashabi ajma'in, amma ba'd. So we are continuing the workshop essentially. So where we stopped last off, we were still talking about the steps of Umrah, and we were talking about the prohibitions of Ihram. And so the next thing we're going to talk about is, because we talked about the pillars of Umrah and obligatory actions of Umrah. How many pillars are there? 3. What are they? Ihram, Tawaf, Sa'i. Right? Ihram, Tawaf, Sa'i. Obligatory actions are Ihram from Miqat and cutting of the hair. Okay? So, Tawaf. When it comes to Tawaf, because it's a rukn, then we need to talk about the prerequisites of Tawaf. And just a reminder again, the prerequisite is something that has to be there prior to the act of worship being performed, to be sustained during the act of worship until the act of worship is complete. The example of the prerequisite is tahara for salah. Okay? So when it comes to tawaf around the Kaaba, there are 10 prerequisites, right? 10 prerequisites associated with it. And you can understand this if you realize that the tawaf is an act of worship and it's akin to salah. So the Prophet ﷺ had mentioned that a tawaf is salah, except that you are allowed to speak in it, which means that some of the prerequisites will also be similar between it and salah. So the prerequisites, right, of tawaf. The first one is the intention, right? The intention that you will be performing a tawaf is an act of worship. So you're not just exercising and doing laps around the Kaaba, astaghfirullah al-azim, but like, the intention that you start the tawaf, right? So the first thing is intention. The next two are something that we are accustomed to, which is Islam and sanity, right? Islam and sanity. Now, the fourth one is here where it gets very similar to prayers. So the first prerequisite is covering of a person's awrah. Okay, the covering of a person's awrah. And the coverage of the awrah is similar to the rules and regulations that are associated with prayers, which means when you're wearing your ihram, you have to be very careful as a male that the izar is covering those parts. So it's not too high or too low, right? For sisters, because you're going to be moving a lot, make sure that nothing is kind of showing, hair is covered properly and everything, because then that violates the covering of the awrah prerequisite. The fifth prerequisite is the avoidance of impurities, najasa, from your clothing or your body. Right? So there be no najasa, no impurities. You're staring at me, Sheikh. You're thinking. Okay. Right. So we're talking about avoid impurities on clothes or on body. So how many is that so far? 5, right? Intentions, Islam, sanity. Come on, what else? Huh? Covering of awrah, we start covering, and then avoid impurities on clothing or body, right? The sixth one is being in a state of tahara, ritual purity, right? That's one of the conditions of tawaf, which means that while you're doing tawaf, for example, if you pass gas, that actually stops, that nullifies your tawaf. You have to go make wudu and start again from the beginning, right? So you have to make sure you're in a state of purity. Sisters, if it is that time of the month, right, you have to wait until it's done to do your tawaf, right? You cannot do your tawaf while in it. There is, Ibn Taymiyyah has an opinion that if it is a necessity and that the group is going to depart and you're not going to be able to perform your Hajj, and so he makes sometimes an exception for this. But hopefully, inshallah, you're not going to need to resort to it. But that's sometimes just mentioned on the side. Ibn Taymiyyah, he has that fatwa for that. All right. The seventh one, prerequisite, is to complete all 7 cycles, starting from the black stone. So your starting point has to be the black stone, and you're going to go counterclockwise until you get to black stone again. That is 1 cycle. You have to complete 7 cycles. For the tawaf to be accepted, it has to be 7 complete cycles. The 8th is having the Kaaba on your left side. So you're going counterclockwise. Okay? Counterclockwise, not clockwise. If it was on your right, you'd be going clockwise. On your left, it is counterclockwise. So you have to do it that way. The 9th prerequisite is that you need to perform this act of worship while walking if you're able. Right? If you're capable of walking, then you must walk. The last one is that you need to perform the tawaf, the cycle, sequentially without interruption. Okay? Interruption, I mean prolonged interruption. I'm not talking about that you stopped for prayers or salat al-janazah. That is allowed. However, when you commence your tawaf again after stopping for the janazah or the salat, the fard, the obligatory prayer, you have to restart from the black stone. So let's say you finished 4 cycles, and in the middle of the 5th, iqamah happened, okay? You stopped. You prayed, okay? You cannot continue from where you are to finish that 5th. You're restarting the 5th again from the black stone. Okay? Is that clear? طيب. So those are the 10 prerequisites for tawaf. Now, I'm mentioning this for a reason, okay? So I'm mentioning the prerequisites, the obligatory actions, and so forth, because when we go from the step of Umrah, I'm going to mention a lot of things. I'm going to realize a lot of them are sunnah, okay? So if you can't remember all of those, it's okay. Just remember the pillars, the prerequisites, and you're good, right? The obligatory actions, and you're fine, okay? Everything else is more of a sunnah. طيب, when it comes to a sa'i is going between the Safa and the Marwa. So after you do tawaf, you head towards the Safa first, and you go from the Safa to the Marwa, 7 times. And going from a Safa to a Marwa is once, right? Going back from Marwa to a Safa is 2, right? It's not 1, 2, right? Because some people actually think that. They think you have to complete one, you have to start from a Safa and end in a Safa, and that is 1, right? No, right? It is going forth is 1, back is the 2nd. So essentially, you're going to start at a Safa and you're going to end in Marwa, right? Because it's odd numbers. You're going to end it in Marwa. So for a sa'i, there are 8 prerequisites. Okay, for a sa'i, there are 8 prerequisites. 3 of them are the same as tawaf, and that is intention, Islam, and sanity. Right? You are going to walk with the intention that this is a Safa. Once again, you're not exercising, you're not walking laps. This is a Safa, right? You intend to go between sa'i, between Safa and Marwa. So the first 3 things are intention, Islam, and sanity. The 4th is that you perform the sa'i sequentially without interruption. Which means once I start, I cannot take long breaks, right? Once I start, I have to keep going. Once again, if I stop for prayer, right, I can continue, I guess, in this case, right? Because it's not a prolonged, whatever the case is. Now, do you have to have wudu for sa'i? No, you don't. You don't have to have wudu for sa'i, okay? It's recommended to have wudu for your sa'i, but it's not like the tawaf where it's a prerequisite. So far it is 4. The 5th prerequisite is to walk. If you're capable to walk, it has to be done walking. The 6th is that it needs to be performed after a valid tawaf. Okay? You cannot, the act of worship of sa'i is not accepted unless it is followed or preceded, unless it is preceded by a valid tawaf. Right? Whether it is a sunnah tawaf or an umrah tawaf or ifada tawaf, whatever it is. So you have to go around the Kaaba 7 times before you start doing the sa'i. Sorry, how many is that so far? That is 6. Is that right? 5? All right. Intention, Islam, sanity, doing it in sequence after a tawaf. That is correct. 5. The 6th one, that is 6. Walking, that is 6. All right. The 7th is that you need to complete all 7 sa'i's. Okay, that's the prerequisite for it to be valid. And the last one is that you need to encompass the entire area between the Safa and Marwa. Okay? And this is really important because some people will not, so we're talking about boundaries over here. So when we talk about sa'i between Safa and Marwa, you need to make sure you start at the Safa, not in front of it, right? So the minimum level is that if your back to the Safa, your heel, right, you'll be placing your heel at the bottom of the Safa. Okay, your toes can be, out of it, but your heel needs to at least start at the bottom of a Safa. And then when you reach to Al-Marwa, your toes need to at least touch the bottom of Al-Marwa. And then when you turn around, your heel is at the bottom of Al-Marwa, and when you reach the Safa, your toes is at least at the bottom of the Marwa. You have to make sure you do that. Otherwise, you're not encompassing the entire area, right? So those are the prerequisites for tawaf and sa'i. Now, we're ready to go from now stepwise, from the beginning to the end of the whole ritual, bearing in mind, once again, all the prerequisites, obligatory, pillars, all these things, right? So, first thing we start with is entering the state of ihram, okay? So, when you travel, if you travel to Mecca, once again, traveling to Mecca, to enter Mecca, in the Hanbali school of thought, you're not allowed to do that without going into a state of ihram. Whether it's for Hajj or Umrah, you're not allowed to cross the geographical miqat, boundary, without entering the state of ihram. So if you're traveling from Medina first, going from Medina, then you should do it when you reach where? Sorry? Yeah, what's the miqat called? We have 5. You mentioned 5 miqats. The closest to Medina is what? Huh? I can't hear you. No. No, ya Sheikh, that's in Mecca. The Medina, yeah, the Medina of Prophet ﷺ. What is the closest miqat? Dhul Hulayfa. It's also called Abiyar Ali. Okay? Dhul Hulayfa or Abiyar Ali. Now, most people, once again, they perform it from there. So you have to remember, usually a bus will take you, I think. Or if you're going to ride the train, then you have to be very careful. If you're going to ride the train, it just passes pretty quick. Okay? So you have to make sure that you're in your ihram. Once you get close to it, you go into state of ihram quickly. So it depends what you're going to take. You're going to take the entire for ritual and everything or not. So you have to make sure that you do the miqat from, don't cross Dhul Hulayfa until you go into state of ihram, right? If you're flying over by a plane, like landing into Jeddah, make sure you do that before ahead of time. Now, prior to entering the ihram, there are some recommendations, okay? And that applies both to males and females, and that is to perform a ritual shower, right? The ghusl, right? To perform like a ritual shower, to groom oneself. So you're going to shave the armpit hair, pubic hair, all these things. You get rid of that, just cleanse yourself. For men, you can wear some sort of a cologne or fragrance before wearing your ihram. Okay. Now, to enter the state of ihram, once again, for men, they need to be only wearing a rida and izar, so 2 pieces of clothing. It is recommended, it's not mandatory, it's recommended preferably that they are clean and white. Okay? They've been washed clean and white. Sisters, on the other hand, all they have to do is wear their normal Islamic clothing, but make sure everything is covered. They don't have to wear white, they don't have to wear any specific colors. That is more of a cultural thing. Now, to enter the state of ihram, so now usually what happens a lot of times, if people want to go through the complete ritual, they take a bus from Medina or a cab, whatever the case is, as a group. They reach Dhul Hulayfa, right? And there are showers there. At least there used to be. I don't know if there still are, but I remember there used to be showers there. People will perform their ghusl there, right? After they perform the ghusl, they put their ihram. They pray 2 rak'ahs, any 2 rak'ahs, doesn't matter, right? Whether it's fard or nafl. And then they go into the state of ihram. That's an intention, right? And the way you go into it is that you utter what you're going to perform. In this case, because we're talking about Umrah, you're going to say, Labbaik Allahumma Umrah. Like this is what you're going to say, right? Labbaik Allahumma Umrah. Which means, Labbaika, which means here I am, right? I'm coming, here I am. Oh Allah, for a Umrah. Labbaik Allahumma Umrah. Now, once again, this is the intention for Umrah because most people are going to be doing which kind of Hajj out of the 3? Tamattu', good. So this is the Labbaik Allahumma Umrah. Later on, you're going to make another intention for Hajj. You're going to say Labbaik Allahumma Hajj. All right. Now, it's also recommended that a person, like you would state a qualifier, right? A qualifier, which is a condition, a stipulation that you put, that if you are prevented from completing your ritual, then you can exit your state of ihram where you were prevented. Because otherwise, you're going to have to get out of your state of ihram, you're going to have to slaughter an animal or fast 10 days, whatever the case is, okay? Now, this is really important for individuals. Once again, this is recommended. In the Hanbali school of thought, it's recommended to do that. So you would say, لبيك اللهم بعمرة فإن حبسني حابس فمحلي حيث حبستني, which means, oh Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I am لبيك اللهم بعمرة, which means I'm here, oh Allah, for your umrah. And if anything holds me back, then my exiting of the state of ihram is at the place where you held me. Is that clear? You're good? No. What is the problem? طيب. So when you go into the state of ihram, if you're prevented from performing your umrah, how are you going to exit the state of ihram? Like you're prevented from doing tawaf, you got sick, whatever the case is, right? Your menstrual cycle hit and it didn't finish until Arafah. You couldn't perform your umrah, right? So what do? You have 1 or 2 options. Include your umrah into your hajj, okay? Place your umrah into your hajj. Or if you made that stipulation, right? This person got sick, whatever the case is, they can continue. That stipulation or that condition is that if I have been prevented from performing the Umrah, then I can exit my state of Ihram. Where was I prevented? Is that clear? Okay. So it's just a stipulation, and it's recommended in the Hanbali school of thought. طيب. So now you're in a state of Ihram, right? You're traveling to Mecca. Once you arrive to Mecca, the first thing you do for Umrah is what? Tawaf, right? Around the Kaaba. And so once you arrive to Mecca, Al-Haram, this is where your ritual is going to start. You're going to head to the Kaaba, and you're going to start your 7th cycle starting from where? The black stone, right? And so you're going to completely face the black stone, and you're going to say, Allahu Akbar. That's it. You're going to complete body face. Now, you only need to face completely your body when you first start. The remainder ones, every time you pass by the black stone, you're just going to point to it, and you say, Allahu Akbar. Raise your hand towards it. No, on the first one, you need to face your entire body, but you can also raise your hand. Ideally, right, you can touch the stone every time you pass, but I would not recommend that. Would not recommend that, okay? Especially if you have your spouses, your children, whatever the case is. It's, people hit each other, right? It's not, especially if you're a sister, do not even go near it, right? Don't even try, right? Brothers, if you're young and healthy and you're ready to take a few punches, right? Take off your glasses if you have them. Go in there. May Allah assist you, right? It is a sunnah, but we're not there to harm people, okay? So just from far away, point to it. When you first start, directly face with your full body, point to it, say Allahu Akbar, and then start your tawaf. When you first start, yes, and then when you're going, Kaaba's to your left. After you pass again? No, you can just go like this. Yeah. Right. You can do that. At the far distance, there's green lights that give an indication where the black stone is. There used to be a long time ago a markation on the ground, but they removed that. Right, so the only thing that's left right now is that green light. If you look to the corner of it, you'll see it. So it will kind of help you to figure out where you are, but just make sure you're in line with it. Now, once again, this is sunnah, right? It's good to do these things. It is also a sunnah to touch the rukn al-yamani, right? The Yemeni corner. So, actually, let me draw it here. So if this is the Kaaba, right? If this is the black stone in this car, or side over here, the Yemeni corner is the one before it. So when you're doing tawaf, right, I'm going to cross the Yemeni corner first, and then on the same side, there's that Hajar al-Aswad, right, the black stone, okay? So between here and there, right, it's actually recommended to touch the Yemeni corner in addition to the Hajar al-Aswad. But in between here, it is recommended to recite a verse from the Quran. رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. Like continuously repeat it until you reach the other side. It's recommended. Once again, this is sunnah. Just a reminder, I covered with you the prerequisites, the pillars, the obligatory actions. All these become, that I'm talking about now, sunnah and recommendations. رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. This means, O our Lord, give us آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيا, in this world, in the hereafter, goodness. Right? آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ, and protect us from the torment or punishment of the hellfire. Now, during the rest of tawaf, it's recommended that you make dua, dhikr, recite Quran, or even if you want to just kind of reflect on things, praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All these things is recommended to do as you are doing your tawaf. Now, after completing the 7 cycles, it is recommended to pray 2 rak'ahs behind Maqam Ibrahim. Okay. Now, Maqam Ibrahim is between the black stone and then the other corner, right? So over here you have the Yemeni the black stone, and then the other corner, which is called the Iraqi corner. Okay? And then the remaining last one is called the Shami corner, right? Because it points toward the Sham. Right? So it's called a Shami corner. So Maqam Ibrahim is in between that area. It is recommended to pray behind it. Now, I'm going to tell you this now. If you try to pray behind it, people will step on you, because people are off. So you can pray at a further distance, okay, and pray and in line with it at a further distance. That would work. So sometimes even you have to get outside of that area, go into the area where sometimes there's Zamzam, and pray in that area if you can. If not, then pray that 2 rak'ah anywhere else. That is fine. Once again, that's a recommendation. It's a sunnah to pray those 2 rak'ahs. وَاتَّخِذُوا مِن مَقَامِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ مُصَلَّى. And it's sunnah to recite قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ and قُلْ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ in them. So you recite the Fatiha, قُلْ يَا الْكَافِرُونَ in first rak'ah. In the second rak'ah, you recite the Fatiha and قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. No, that is after you finish the 7. After you finish all 7. So once you engage in tawaf, that's the only thing you're going to do. The only time you're going to stop, right, is if it's for salah, regular salah, or salat janazah. And usually salat janazah is after the obligatory prayer. If you nullified your wudu, then you go make wudu and come back again and start from all over again. But once you start, you're going to complete all 7. Okay. Once that's done, it's recommended to pray those 2 rak'ahs behind Maqam Ibrahim. Don't do it directly behind it in that area, because once again, a lot of people are going to be there. Step away to the side, like further, like, you know, so let's say Maqam Ibrahim is at the door. I'm this far away. Probably you're going to have to go further, but that's an example, right? If you can't do that, then pray anywhere else those 2 rak'ahs. The sunnah is to recite قُلْ يَا الْكَافِرُونَ and قُلْ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. Right. Now, once this is done, right, it is sunnah afterwards to drink from the water of Zamzam. Sunnah to drink from water of Zamzam. Now that is done for the section of Tawaf, of the Umrah. Then you're going to proceed to do your Sa'i of Safa and Marwa. And you're going to head to the Safa area first, okay? Following the Tawaf. Once again, Sa'i is only valid after a Tawaf. You cannot switch the order. You cannot do your Sa'i and then a Tawaf. That's invalid. So after you do Tawaf, you can go to your Sa'i. Now, it is permissible to take a break before you start your Tawaf. Doesn't matter how long the break is. Sorry, before you start your Sa'i. So you can do your Tawaf. If you're tired, rest. How much rest you need. 20 minutes, half an hour, it doesn't matter. Okay? Because once you start the Sa'i, you don't want to stop. You want to continue. Right? So you're going to start from the Safa. And as you're approaching the Safa, you're getting close to it, it is sunnah to recite Inna Safa wal Marwa min sha'airillah, right? That verily, Safa and Marwa are from the symbols of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, are symbols of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because this is what the Prophet ﷺ recited as he got closer. And then he said, أَبْدَأُ بِمَا بَدَأَ اللَّهُ بِهِ. I will start with what Allah started with, meaning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this verse started with As-Safa. So I will start with As-Safa. Now, it is recommended and sunnah, once you get to the Safa, you face the Kaaba and you say the following dhikr, right? And you do this 3 times. And after each time, you make a dua for how long you do it. It's recommended to do it at As-Safa and at Al-Marwa. So you're going to go to Safa first, turn towards the Kaaba, and you're going to say Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah, wahdahu la sharika lah, lahul mulk, wa lahul hamd, wa huwa ala kulli shay'in qadir, La ilaha illallah wahda, anjaza wa'da, wa nasra abda, wa hazama al-ahzaba wahda. Right? And then you make a dua. And then you repeat that same one again for a second time, make a dua, and a third time, and you make a dua. Right? After each time. Once again, that's recommended. Okay? So once again, it is Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah, wahdahu la sharika lah, lahul mulk, wa lahul hamd, wa huwa ala kulli shay'in qadir, La ilaha illallah wahda, anjaza wa'da, wa nasra abda, wa hazama al-ahzaba wahda. Alright? Do you guys want a translation? Alright. So Allahu Akbar, everyone knows what Allahu Akbar is, right? So you're saying that 3 times, and you're saying La ilaha illallah wahda, that there's no true God, worthy of deity except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He has no partners. لا شريك له. له الملك وله الحمد وهو على كل شيء قدير. All praises belong to Him. له الملك. He has all kingdomship. وله الحمد, and all praises belong to Him. وهو على كل شيء قدير, and He is capable over everything. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is capable over all things. He has power over all things. لا إله إلا الله. Again, you say that. There's no true deity worthy of worship except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. أنجز وعده. أنجز وعده, which means He has fulfilled His promise. وَنَصَرَ عَبْدَ, and He had granted victory to His slave, referring to the Prophet ﷺ. وَهَزَمَ الْأَحْزَابَ وَحْدَ, and He defeated the confederation alone. Right? The confederation, the Ahzab that gathered to defeat the Muslims, He defeated the Confederates alone. Right? So that is the dua you make. Now, as you turn around from Al-Marwa, from As-Safa, to go towards Al-Marwa, right there at the beginning, you're going to see two green boundaries, right? For men, they are to walk in a fast pace, harwala, right? It's almost like a light jog, fast pace, from there to the other end of the green one. That is only for men. Now, in Hajj season or Umrah season this late, it could be a lot of people. If you can do it, that is good. If you can't, don't force it, right? Don't push people. But once again, it is the sunnah that has been established by the mother of Ismail alayhi salam at that time when she was running in the valley from one end to the other end. Now, during that time, right, when you're doing this, when you're going from one side to the other side, obviously you're going to engage in dua, in dhikr, you can recite the Quran, and so forth. Once you reach the Marwa, you're going to turn towards the Kaaba and say that same statements again with dua in between. All right? Now, once you're done, right, you're going to head. There's a lot of barbers. This is where you cut your hair or you trim your hair with female. Cut or shave, right? And by doing that, you've completed your Umrah and you exit the state of Ihram. All right? Is that clear? Right. Now, most people will do that either the 6th day or 7th day of Dhul Hijjah. Right? Some people do it earlier and stay in Mecca a few days. But the latest, most people will be done by the 7th day of the Hajj, right? Which now then will start us on the Hajj, right? So we're going to start the Hajj step by step, right? So we'll start with prerequisites, pillars, and then also the obligatory actions, and then we're going to go step by step from beginning to the end. Because now you are in Mecca, we're going to look at what's happened. All right, so prerequisites are exactly the same 5 as Umrah, which means that this is the 5 prerequisites for it to be mandatory. What are those 5? Islam, sanity, adulthood, freedom and ability. Okay? Freedom and ability. Pillars. How many pillars are in Umrah? Umrah. 3. 3 pillars in Umrah. Hajj is only 4 pillars, okay? So in Umrah, what are they again? Tawaf, Sa'i, and Ihram. Good, excellent. No, pillars. Pillars of Umrah. Ihram, Tawaf, Sa'i, okay? In Hajj, it is 4, right? It is Ihram, Tawaf, Sa'i, and you're going to add Arafah, okay? So if you want to, well, we can't do it in order. In order will be Ihram, Arafah, Tawaf, Sa'i. Right? Depends on which ritual you perform. But it is Ihram, right? And then there's also standing in Arafah. And that starts from the time of Fajr of the day of Arafah all the way until the day of Eid. This is the time where you can stand on Arafah. We'll go into details a bit more about that. And then there's Tawaf al-Ifada on the day of Eid. Right? Tawaf al-Ifada, which is the day of Eid itself, which is the 10th day of Hijjah. And it starts time from the middle of the night of Eid for those who stood on Arafah, right? And a sa'i between the Safa and Marwa after you perform your tawaf. So those are the pillars. Now, when it comes to the obligatory actions of Hajj, Umrah, how many obligatory actions are there? Umrah, how many obligatory actions? Pillars are 3. Obligatory actions are 2. What are they? Ihram from miqat, right? And cutting hair, good. For Hajj, it is 7 obligatory actions. Okay? 7 obligatory actions. The first is the same, ihram for miqat. All right? Or the hill. I should add hill, which is outside the boundaries of Mecca. Okay? The second obligatory action, I have to pay attention to this. Remember, we said a pillar of Hajj is Arafah. Now, the obligation, right? One of the obligatory actions in Hajj is standing in Arafah until sunset. Right? For those who reach there during the day. So if you arrive during the day in Arafah, it is obligatory to stay all the way until sunset. Right? If you leave before that, then you left a mandatory act. It means your Hajj is valid, but you have to pay an expiation. All right? So that is the second one. The third one is staying overnight in Muzdalifah. Okay? So staying at night in Muzdalifah, staying overnight in Muzdalifah until the middle of the night. I'm not talking about middle of the night as in like midnight, but you have to calculate the middle of the night. You calculate, look, when sunset is, when sunrise. So you have to stay there until the middle of the night for those who reach there before that time. Most of the time, people will leave from Arafah at Maghrib time, and Muzdalifah is right next to it. So they'll reach there depending on the buses and routes, but they'll reach there close to Isha time, right? Before middle of the night. So you have to stay there until you cross the middle of the night, and then you permissible for you to leave, right? Especially if you have an excuse. Of course, it's recommended to stay afterwards. So that is the third obligation, which is staying in Muzdalifah. The fourth is sleeping in Mina, or staying overnight in Mina, during the days of Tashriq, which is the 11th to 12th, the night of the 11th, the night of the 12th, and the night of the 13th. Okay, so you're sleeping over there. So that is how many? 4? That is 4. The fifth obligation is throwing the jamarat. That's an obligation in all days of Tashriq, plus the additional day of Nahr. So you're throwing each one with 7 stones. The 6th one is cutting the hair or shaving. And the 7th one is the farewell tawaf. So there's only a farewell tawaf in Hajj, not in Umrah. Okay? Tawaf al-Wada' is in Hajj. So you perform Tawaf al-Wada'. So that's the farewell tawaf. So those are the obligatory actions. They are 7th. I'm going to go over them again. It is ihram for miqat. What else? Staying at Arafah until Maghrib, if you stay there during the day. Staying at Muzdalifah until the middle of the night, if you arrive there before the middle of the night. Sleeping in Mina. Throwing of the jamarat. Cutting of the hair. Tawaf al-Wada'. Okay, farewell tawaf. We're good? Huh? Rukna ya Sheikh. Yes. Yes, it's mandatory. So standing in Arafah is a rukn. Standing until Maghrib is a wajib. معناها if you leave before Maghrib, you did not perform the wajib, you perform the rukn only. Right? And this is for a person who arrived to Arafah during the day. طيب. So the obligatory actions in Umrah is to go into ihram from the miqat. Your ihram would be from the miqat. And the second one is cutting or trimming the hair. So, okay, so this is now a procedure, right? We're going to go into the steps of Hajj, okay? So I just want to talk about obligation, prerequisites, and pillars. Now we're going to go through the step by days, okay? Starting from the 8th of Dhul Hijjah, okay? So this is starting on the 8th day, right? 9th night of Dhul Hijjah. So the 9th night is the night of Arafah. So you're still in Mina, right? So this is where you perform your ghusl, right? You put on your garments, for men, the top and the bottom. You perfume yourself before you do it. Now, you're gonna go into a state of ihram. You want to do that outside of the area of Mecca, the Haram of Mecca. You do it outside because you're already in Mecca, so you go outside into the Hill and you go into the state of Ihram, right? And you say Labbaik Allahumma Hajja, okay? And then you give that stipulation, فَإِنْ حَبَسَنِي حَابِسْ فَمَحِلِّي حَيْثُ حَبَسْتَنِي, right? Once again, if anything holds me back, then my Hill, I get out of my Ihram, is where I was held back. Once again, it's highly recommended, especially in the school, Hamdi School of Fiqh, that you make that statement just in case something impedes you from completing your Hajj. The dua, لبيك اللهم حجا فإن حبسني حابس فمحلي حيث حبستني. So that is dua. So this is when you are in Mina. So many people will go to Mina, right? That's called Yawm al-Tarwiyah also. Tarwiyah, which means you getting water. People get at that time, they're going to get Zamzam water and stay there, gather. So it's called Yawm al-Tarwiyah, which essentially is on the 8th day of the Hijjah, 9th night of Arafah. Okay? So, you're going to spend the night there, okay, in your Ihram. So this is your in your Ihram state. It's recommended, of course, to go into Ihram on that day. Maximum, you cannot delay your Ihram, right, beyond the day of Arafah. Because you have to stand on Arafah in a state of Ihram, right? So you don't want to delay that. Preferably, you do it on the 8th day or 9th night of Arafah in Mina. And you're going to stay that night in Mina. Now, you wake up the next morning, right? Of course, okay, so I forgot to mention. Once you go into your state of Ihram, right, from the moment you have your Ihram until the 10th day of the Hijjah, it is recommended you to always engage in talbiyah. Labbaik Allahumma, labbaik. Labbaik la sharika laka, labbaik. Inna alhamda wa ni'mata laka wal mulk la sharika lak. There's different variations, but that is the sunnah the Prophet mentioned. There's other variations for that. So that is after you go into your state of Ihram, it is recommended to always do that. So the talbiyah essentially reminds, it's recommended to mention them if you are walking, going up a hill or down from a valley, or if you forget about the rights, you want to focus back on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so the talbiyah helps with that, right? It's a reminder, constant reminder for you that you're in a state of Ihram. All right, you're going to wake up next morning, it's the 9th day. It is the day of Arafah, right? And this is the rukn, that's the first rukn. And so you must be somewhere, you must stand somewhere. Most of the time, these Hajj groups will take you by buses, and they're going to take you to Arafah. Now, Arafah is a huge place. Now, this is the first one I have over there, right? That's station number 1, right? So, Arafah is a huge piece of land. The mountain of Arafah is just part of all of Arafah, okay? It's just a small part. Many people want to stand on the mountain of Arafah. You could, right, if you want, but if you have your spouse, your children, I would not recommend you standing on Arafah, the mountain, right? You're going to be in June. It'll be extremely hot. Sometimes dangerous. You have to understand that all of Arafah is a mawqif, is a place of standing. All of it. Just make sure you're within the boundaries, okay? And you're going to arrive there. By the way, once again, there's usually tents. Like these groups have tents, you can take shelter in there. Focus, right? Sit there, don't sleep the entire day, right? I've seen some people sleep the entire day there, eat, mashallah, buffets, and they're during their time, they forget to do dhikr, they forget to make dua. No, that day of Arafah is the most important day, right? That is the day where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives people's sins. You want to engage as much worship as you can on that day. Yes? Do you have to be standing? No, you don't have to be standing, right? It's called mawqif, but it doesn't mean you have to be standing. So no, you don't have to be standing. You can be sitting, you can be lying down, whatever the case is, right? Some people alternate between standing and sitting because they get tired. Some people walk. Nothing. It's fine. Some people will fall asleep because they're tired. It's okay. But I'm just saying, don't sleep from your arrival until Maghrib. You just, your Hajj is accepted, right? But, yeah, the ritual is accepted, but, you want more than that, right? You want to engage in dua. Now, you'll stay there during the day until sunset. Once sunset sets, this is when you can move to Muzdalifah, right? That is the next station. So Muzdalifah is right next to it. Some people walk, other people take buses. Depends how close you are in Mina compared to Muzdalifah. And so the next one, you're going to go to Muzdalifah, right? Once again, this is still this is the 10th night, right? This is the 10th night. So Arafah was the 9th day. You finish that, you're going to go to Muzdalifah, and this is when you leave Arafah after sunset. Do not leave Arafah before sunset, right? Once you reach Muzdalifah, you can pray Maghrib and Isha. Now, sometimes because of organizational things, some people get left behind for such a long period in Arafah, okay? That Maghrib is done, Isha enters. Oh, it's okay. Pray Maghrib and Isha where you are, right? And make sure that you get on the bus in time until you reach wherever you are. Once you reach Muzdalifah, it is obligatory upon the majority of opinion of scholars that you stay there during the night, okay? You stay there in the night. In the Hamdi school of thought, you can leave after midnight. The way to calculate that is figure out what time is Maghrib, what time is Isha, how many hours, divide by 2. Don't leave before that time. You need to stay at least at that time. It is permissible, right, to leave after that midnight. And where are you going to leave? You're going to continue the rest of rituals, right? But once again, it is the sunnah is to pray Maghrib and Isha there, and to sleep after Isha. It is also recommended usually to gather your stones, your pebbles you're going to throw from Muzdalifah. Once again, recommended. The reality is sometimes it's difficult. I was there last November. It was not Hajj season, but I was just went to see the area, and there's a lot of concrete now, right? I don't know where we're gonna find pebbles. But if you can pick it, like it's Sunnah recommended to pick it from Muzdalifah. If you can pick it up when you're in Arafah, pick it up when you're in Arafah. To be on the safe side, some people are advising you to pick pebbles from here before you leave, right? So you need a total of how many? 70, right? You need a total of 70, and they're not larger than a size of a chickpea, right? Hummusa, chickpea, not larger than that size, okay? You're going to gather 70 of those, keep them with you, put them in a bag, whatever the case, you can use it as an emergency. Try to collect from Muzdalifah as much as you can, from Arafah. If you're unable to complete the numbers, then take from what you have saved. Wallahu alam. Yes? Well, how are you going to, part of the ritual is throwing the 7 stones, so how are you going to do that? No, just pick it up from anywhere. You find 70 stones, right? Huh? Yeah, I don't, delivery, Amazon, I don't care what is it, whatever's there you can get, find a way to get them, right? Make sure by the way, make sure they're stones, not like pieces of concrete, right? Like actual natural pebbles. Allah alam, do your best of judgment, right? But anyway, you're going to collect them from there. طيب. So, this is moving from Arafah to Muzdalifah all night long. So, you can leave after midnight or wait until you pray Fajr and then leave. You're going to walk through Mina, right? The 3 circles there are the 3 jamarat. The first is the smallest, then the mid, and then the largest. You're going to throw at that last one. Okay, this is where you throw. You throw 7 stones. That's an aqaba, right? That is on the day of Eid. So on the day of Eid has several rituals, right? The first one that's going to happen is that throwing of the jamarat, okay? So that's the 10th day of Eid, right? So there's 4 activities, 4 things you'll do that day, right? The first one is the stone of al-aqaba. You're going to throw that one. Followed usually in, this is Mina. This is where the animals need to be sacrificed. But for most of the pilgrims, what they do is they pay ahead of time for somebody to slaughter it. Right? Fidya. I don't know what's it called. But you usually the Hajj group, you pay ahead of time and they all deal with it, right? So that's the second action. The third is the cutting or shaving of the men's hair and trimming of the women. And the fourth act is you are going to do tawaf and sa'i. Those are the 4 actions you're going to do on that day, okay? Tawaf al-ifada and sa'i, that last one can be delayed if you need to. So it can be delayed to the 11th, the 12th, or the 13th of the Hijjah. Okay? However, if you delay them, you're still not out of your state of complete ihram. Once you perform 3 of the 4 steps, right, doing Ramit al-Aqaba, the cutting of your hair, or the sacrificial animals, right, or you do sa'i and tawaf, it doesn't matter, right? If we do 3 of the 4 above, then you're partially out of ihram. So everything that was forbidden is now permissible except spousal relations. Right? So for example, if you did the stoning of Jamarat and then you performed your tawaf and sa'a and you cut your hair, that's it. Okay? You can go home and change your garment. If you're sure your animal got slaughtered, you cut your hair and you did the rami of Jamarat, you have exited partially your state of ihram. You can change your clothes, shower, and then go do your tawaf and sa'i. You can do all of that, right? Once again, you have 4 actions. 3 out of 4 will take you out of the partial state of ihram. After finishing all 4 of acts of worship, then you're out of complete state of ihram, right? Nothing is now prohibited anymore, right? طيب, I think that is that day. Now, once you finish, so this is the 10th day, right? The remaining days are the 11th, the 12th, and the 13th, right? In those 3 days, it's mandatory to stay in Mina, and you wake up the next morning, and you're going to go throw 1, 2, 3 each day, and you have to do it in a row, right? Start from the first, and the way they've done it is it's a one-way direction. You can't avoid it. Like it's all funneled through one direction, and so you're going to have to go through the first, second, and third, and you're going to throw 7 on each one, and as you're throwing, you're going to say Bismillah Allahu Akbar, right? You're going to say Bismillah Allahu Akbar. Actually, usually you say Allahu Akbar. Bismillah is when you slaughter, right? You say Allahu Akbar, right? As you throw each stone. With each stone, you throw Allahu Akbar, but make sure you actually hit it in the area you're supposed to hit, okay? Now, once again, it is a symbolic act of worship. You are not stoning the shaitan. Some people get extremely emotional, and they literally think they're stoning the shaitan, that they start throwing a lot of things, right? Say what? Yeah, no, it's true. Slippers, some people throw like huge rocks and start cursing at the shaitan and all these things. It's an act of worship. It's a ritual. Yes, it might have started originally as part of the ritual where Ibrahim alayhi salam, right, when the shaitan came to him 3 times to try to deceive him and convince him from not fulfilling Allah's order, and this is what he did. This is symbolic of our animosity or our challenge to the shaitan, but in the end it's an act of worship, right? So we perform it as the Prophet ﷺ had performed it. And so this is done on each day, right? 7 stones, 7 stones, 7 stones. So each day that is 21 stones, right? And you say Allahu Akbar on each one of them. So you're going to sleep that 3 nights, and that is about your Hajj is complete then, right? Some people from there will go to Medina, others will go back home, whatever the case is. But anyway, so that is the step-by-step from beginning to end. Huh? Tawaf al-Wada', actually, which reminded me. Tawaf al-Wada' is what you do before you leave Mecca, right? Tawaf al-Wada' is what you perform before you leave Mecca completely, right? So that is Tawaf al-Wada'. Now? You can delay Tawaf al-Ifadah, but remember, if you do that, you're still not completely out of Ihram. You're only partially out of Ihram. So yes, you can, you can wear clothing. You can't just have spousal relationships, right? You can't have that. So yes, you can combine Tawaf al-Ifadah with Tawaf al-Wada', right? Some people would do that. Some sisters will have to do that, depending on what's happening with them that time, whatever that time of the month. Sometimes they'll have to delay it at the end. Those are options that a person can that they have. Tawaf al-Wada' does not require you to go in state of ihram. Does not require you to wear it's just in your normal clothing, but you have to abide by the prerequisites. So you're in a state of wudu, you're covering your awrah, you start from the black stone, you do all 7 in a row. All these things we talked about is that you have to do, inshallah. That is just quickly a step by step of the Tawaf al-Wada. Now, sisters, you don't, okay, so it is an obligatory Tawaf al-Wada. There's an exception for ladies that aren't able to perform it because of their cycle. If it happens, they don't have to perform the Tawaf al-Wada. Right? Yes. Mm. Yes, it's an obligation, so you expiate it by slaughtering. Allah. Yes. Yes. No, 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 no. You should not. You should not be, like you should not intentionally. So essentially, it's the last thing you do before leaving, right? So you're gonna do it and go. Now, logistically, sometimes that is difficult, right? Because they'll say the bus. Listen, the bus is gonna leave at 6 o'clock. Make sure you check out of your rooms by 5. So you're gonna go do your tawaf. You arrived by 4:30 to your hotel. You packed your bag. You're downstairs by 5 o'clock. Everything is good, right? Like the bus doesn't show up, right? That's out of your hands. 7, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. It's 11 o'clock at night. Yeah, Sheikh, I've been here for like 6 hours. That's out of your hands, right? Because you never know if you go back again, they might leave you, right? And they will leave you, right? So this is out of your hand. This does not count because most of the time most people don't stay. Allah alam, I don't know if they stay that or not. So it's usually what you do before you leave, right? But once again, sometimes logistically things are out of our hand. Well, yeah, it's the last thing you do, but safely. Don't take risks. Right? No, no, you should not stay too long. Unless, once again, it's something that you need to do, whatever the case is, stuff like that. That is different, but intend to have it your last thing. That's why it's called Tawaf al-Wada', right? The farewell before you leave. Right? You intend, khalas, you're leaving, right? طيب. So, just to summarize the steps again, right? The first day, which is the 8th and the 9th, this is, of the Hajj, you're gonna be staying in Mina, that's Yawm al-Tarwiyah. You're gonna go into state of Ihram. You're gonna wake up next morning, that's the 9th, that is the day of Arafah. You're gonna spend the day on Arafah until sunset. From sunset, afterwards, you're gonna go to Muzdalifah. You're gonna stay the night in Muzdalifah. So that is the night of Eid. Right? You're gonna stay in Muzdalifah. You're gonna wake up in the morning. You're gonna head towards Mina. So that is the day of Eid. There's 4 actions performed in the day of Eid. You're gonna first throw the Aqaba in Mina. You're gonna slaughter the animals. You're not gonna do it, somebody else will do it. You cut your hair, and then there's Tawaf al-Ifada and Sa'i. That is on the day of Eid. That night, you're gonna stay in Mina. That's the night of the 11th. You're gonna wake up in the morning, day of 11th. You're gonna throw the 3 jamarat, right? Don't throw it before Dhuhr time. Wait until after Dhuhr time. Okay? I forgot to mention that. So wait after Dhuhr time is Zawal. The sunnah is to throw it after Dhuhr time. So you go afterwards, you throw it. You have all the way until, a little bit in the evening, but throw it then. And you're going to do that 3 days in a row, the 11th, the 12th, and the 13th. After the 13th, you can leave, right? Actually, you can leave after the 12th. But, this is called ta'jil, ajjala, which means you hasten. You can leave after the 12th. But most people stay after the 13th. Prior to leaving Mecca, you do Tawaf al-Wada', and that's it. You're done. Your ritual is complete. Jazakumullah khair. Any questions? Yes. So the sunnah is to pray Maghrib and Isha in Muzdalifah. But you are going to be in a situation where you're going to have to make a judgment call. When I went, the last time I did Hajj, our bus did not show up until after Isha, right? Like by a long time. So we prayed Maghrib and Isha in Arafah. Majority of people will be able to pray Maghrib and Isha in Muzdalifah. Well, because you combine prayers. So you're delaying it, but you have to have the intention to delay it. Wallahu a'lam. So what are you talking about? So this is the day of Arafah. That is the 9th. Right? That is the day of 9th. Okay? This is the night of the 10th. Yes. Because in our Sharia, the night precedes the day. So this is the night of the 10th, the night of Eid. You're staying in Muzdalifah. You're going to wake up in the morning, and you're going to do these all. You can do all of them on the 10th, right, day, which is the day of Eid, right? So you're going to move from here. So there's a boundary like here. So Muzdalifah is stuck to Mina. You're going to walk all the way to this Jamara. You're going to throw it 7 times. Slaughtering happens in Mina also. So it's the second, right? You can cut your hair in Mina, or you can cut it go to the Haram, right? So you're going to travel all the way to the Haram, and you're going to do your tawaf, and then Safa and Marwa, and that's it. Your ritual's done. So, yes. So this is Tawaf al-Ifada, right? This is Tawaf al-Ifada, which is the day of Eid. But the farewell is called Tawaf al-Wada'. This is done after you go back to Mina and you stay the 11th night, the 12th night, and the 13th night, right? Before you leave, most people will leave either the 13th day. Some will stay in the hotel in Mecca for 14, 15, 16, for a few more days, whatever the case is. But once you decide to leave, that day you're going to leave, you're going to do Tawaf al-Wada', farewell, which is just going 7 times around the Kaaba. There is no sa'i. There's no sa'i. Just Tawaf of farewell, and then you're gone. Right?
Why do you take 7 before we go 21?
The day of Eid, you're throwing 7. Calculate with me, okay? And then the first day of Tashriq, 21. 21 plus 7 is 28, right? Second day, another 21. That is?
Another 20.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yes, 21 each time. So it's 7, 7, 7. Okay? So in total, so it's 21 plus times 3 is what?
63.
Plus 7?
7.
Engineer. جزاكم الله